Good evening. If you found your way here tonight, maybe your day's been long. Maybe your mind is still racing a little. Or maybe you just need a voice in the quiet. So, breathe. Let the world slow down, just for a while. Tonight, I'll take you deep into a forest where time doesn't move the way it should. Where someone who wanted to disappear found something that had been waiting. This isn't a story to scare you. Not really. It's a soft tale of silence, of memory, of the kind of hunger that lives under roots and breathes with the trees. So, curl up. Let your eyes grow heavy. And if the woods call to you in your dreams tonight, just remember, not everything that's quiet is safe. Chapter 21. Don't you think this idea is a little far-fetched? I asked. Chances are, we're not going to find anything at all. I know that, Deb said. We don't even have any legal jurisdiction here. This is Broward County, and the folks in Broward don't exactly love us. So, for God's sake, shut up, Dexter, my sister snapped. You sound like some whiny little girl. Maybe she wasn't wrong, though that wasn't a very kind way to put it. Deborah, on the other hand, seemed to have nerves of steel and everything properly wired. As we pulled off the Sawgrass Expressway and entered the parking lot of the Office Depot Center, I could practically hear her jaw creaking with how hard she was clenching it. Dirty Harriet, I murmured to myself, but Deb must have been eavesdropping. Damn it, she muttered. I shifted my gaze from Deborah's stone-cold marble face to the arena itself. For one brief moment, with the morning sun hitting it at just the right angle, the place looked like it was under siege from an alien armada. Of course, those were just the massive outdoor light arrays mounted around the building, protruding like oversized metal mushrooms. Some architect had probably told someone they were bold and youthful. I'm sure they were, when lit correctly. I sincerely hoped that one day they'd finally find the right lighting. We drove one lap around the arena, looking for any sign of life. On the second lap, a beat-up Toyota chugged into view and stopped outside a set of doors. The spectator entrance was held closed with a rope looped through the handles and tied to the frame. Before the car had even fully stopped, Deborah had the door open and was out. "Good morning, sir," she said to the man getting out of the Toyota. He looked to be in his 50s, short and stocky, wearing worn-out green pants and a blue nylon jacket. He glanced at Deb in uniform and immediately looked uneasy. "What is this? I didn't do anything," he said. "Do you work here, sir?" "Of course. What do you think I'm doing here at 8 in the morning?" "May I have your name, sir?" He fumbled for his wallet. "Steban Rodriguez. I've got ID." Deborah waved it off. "That's okay," she said. "What are you doing here at this hour, Steban?" He shrugged and tucked the wallet away. "I'm supposed to be here early most days, but the team's on the road. Vancouver, Ottawa, and Los Angeles. so I came a little later today. Is there anyone else here now, Stebbin? Nope, just me. Everybody else sleeps in. What about at night? Is there a security guard? He waved his arm in a slow arc. Security patrols the parking lot at night, but not very often. Most days, I'm the first one in. You mean you're the first person to enter the building? Right, that's what I said, isn't it? I stepped out of the car and leaned against the roof. Are you the one who drives the Zamboni to prep the ice for morning practice? I asked. Deb shot me a look of irritation. Stebbin gave me a squint, eyeing my flashy Hawaiian shirt and gabardine pants. What kind of cop are you supposed to be? I'm a computer geek cop, I said. I work in the lab. Oh, right, he said, nodding like that made perfect sense. Do you drive the Zamboni, Stebbin? I repeated. Yeah, you know, they don't let me drive it during games, you know. That's for the pretty boys. They want some kid out there, somebody with a name, maybe. Make a lap and wave, that kind of crap. But I do the morning practices when the team's home. I only drive the Zamboni early in the morning, but they're on the road now, so I came late. We'd like to take a quick look inside the arena, Deb said, clearly growing impatient with my chit-chat. Stebbin turned back to her, one eye flashing mischievously. Sure, he said. You got a warrant? Deb blushed. It made for a striking contrast against her blue uniform, but probably wasn't the best way to assert authority. And knowing my sister, I knew that she knew she was blushing, and that she was about to get pissed. Given that we didn't have a warrant, and that nothing we were doing here was even remotely official, I figured getting pissed wasn't the best tactical option. Stebbin, I cut in, before Deb could say something regrettable. Yeah? How long have you worked here? He shrugged. Since this place opened. Before that, I worked 2 years at the old arena. So I guess you were here last week when they found the body under the ice. Stebbin looked away. Beneath his sun-worn skin, he turned pale. He swallowed hard. I never want to see anything like that again, man, he said. Ever. I nodded with genuine sympathy. I don't blame you, I said. And that's exactly why we're here. I glanced at Deb to make sure she wasn't reaching for a weapon or doing something equally rash. She gave me a tight-lipped look of disapproval and tapped her foot, but said nothing. Stebbin, I said, stepping a little closer and lowering my voice into a tone of utmost seriousness. We think there's a good chance that when you open those doors this morning, you might find something just like that waiting for you. God damn it, he exploded. I don't want anything to do with that crap anymore. Of course not. To hell with that sick crap, he said. Exactly, I agreed. So why not let us take a quick look first? Just to be sure. He stared at me, mouth slightly open, then looked at Deborah, still frowning, her expression especially commanding in her uniform. I could get in trouble, he said. I could lose my job. I gave him a genuinely sympathetic smile. Or you could walk in and find a pile of limbs. And this time, there might be a lot more. God damn, he muttered again. I get myself in trouble. Lose my job. For what? Why would I do that? What about civic duty? Come on, man, he said. Don't play me like that. Do you people care if I lose my job? He didn't hold out his hand, something I found noble. but it was clear he was hoping for a little something to ease the risk. Totally reasonable, considering this was Miami. But I only had $5 to my name and desperately needed a guava pastry and a coffee. So I just nodded with heartfelt man-to-man understanding. "You're right," I said. "We hope you don't have to see those body parts. Did I mention there might be a lot of them this time? But of course, I wouldn't want you to lose your job. Sorry to bother you, Steban. Have a nice day." I smiled at Deborah. "Let's go, officer. We need to get back to the other crime scene and look for fingers." Deb was still scowling, but at least she was smart enough to play along. She opened the car door while I waved cheerfully to Steban and slid inside. "Wait," Steban called out. I looked at him with polite curiosity. "Swear to God, I never want to see anything like that again," he said. He looked at me for a moment, maybe hoping I'd be generous with some spare change. But as I mentioned, that pastry was weighing on my conscience, and I didn't budge. Steban licked his lips, then turned abruptly and shoved a key into the lock on the large double door. "Go ahead. I'll wait out here." "If you're sure," I said. "Just go already, man. What more do you want from me? Go!" I got out of the car, smiling at Deborah. "He's sure," I said. Shook her head at me. A strange blend of little sister disappointment and hardened cop cynicism. She walked around the car and stepped through the door, and I followed. Inside, the arena was cool and dim, which really shouldn't have surprised me. After all, it was a hockey rink in the morning. Steban probably knew where the light switch was, but he hadn't shared that with us. Deb unhooked the big flashlight from her belt and swept the beam across the ice. I held my breath as the light passed over one goal net, then the other. She walked slowly along the edge of the rink, pausing once or twice, then returned to stand beside me. "Nothing," she said. "Damn it. You sound disappointed." She growled at me and headed back out. I stayed where I was, in the center of the ice, feeling the cold rising up and indulging in a few pleasant thoughts. Or more accurately, not entirely my thoughts. Because as Deb turned and walked out, I heard a faint voice near my shoulder, a dry, calm tisk, a familiar flutter like the brush of a feather, just at the edge of hearing. While my dear sister exited, I stood still on the ice, eyes closed, listening to what my old friend had to say. Not much, just a faint whisper, a fleeting breath of sound. But I listened. I heard him tisk, whisper sweet and terrible things into one ear, while in the other, I heard Deb asking Steban to turn on the lights. A few moments later, he did. And just as the murmur in my mind reached a crescendo of amused, dreadful delight. "What is it?" I asked politely. The only reply was a rush of thrilling desire. I didn't know what it meant, but I wasn't at all surprised when the screaming began. Steban screamed like hell. It was a high-pitched, broken shriek, sounded more like violent retching than anything else. There was nothing musical about his reaction. I opened my eyes. It's hard to concentrate under these conditions, but there wasn't much else left to hear. The whispering had stopped once the screaming began. After all, the screaming said everything, didn't it? I opened my eyes just in time to see Stebbin come flying out of the small storage room on the opposite side of the arena, launched like from a catapult, arcing across the ice. He hit hard, skidded, flailed, screamed in Spanish, and finally slammed head first into the rink boards. He staggered upright and stumbled toward the exit, trembling with terror. A small streak of blood marked the ice where he had landed. Deborah came rushing in, gun drawn, as Stebbin scrambled past her and burst out into the daylight. "What the hell was that?" Deborah shouted, raising her weapon, ready. I tilted my head, still catching the echo of that last dry tisk. And now, with Stebbin's horrified screams still ringing in my ears, I understood. "I think Stebbin found something," I said. Chapter 22. The etiquette of police procedure, as I had tried my best to explain to Deborah, is a slippery creature with countless tentacles. When you bring two law enforcement agencies together, especially ones that don't care much for each other, cooperation tends to progress very slowly, very formally, with plenty of foot dragging, polite apologies, veiled insults, and unspoken threats. Of course, it's always entertaining to watch, but it makes the process far messier than it needs to be. As a result, it took several hours after Stephen's horrific screaming before law enforcement was officially mobilized, and our team was finally allowed to begin examining the small, happy surprise our new friend Stephen had discovered upon unlocking the storage room. In the meantime, Deborah mostly stood around, doing her best to contain her frustration, which she didn't bother much to hide. Captain Matthews showed up, dragging along La Guerta. They shook hands with their counterparts from Broward County, Captain Moon and Detective McClellan. A flurry of carefully polite conversation followed, all bubbling around a central issue. Matthews, quite reasonably, asserted that the discovery of 6 arms and 6 legs in Broward was likely part of an ongoing investigation from his department, since those limbs appeared to match the 3 headless bodies discovered in Miami-Dade. He argued with words so friendly and simple they bordered on condescending that it would be a bit odd to find 3 heads without bodies in one location, and then 3 bodies without heads appearing separately in another. Moon and McClellan, equally reasonable, pointed out that in Miami, headless victims were hardly news, but in Broward, this sort of thing was, shall we say, less routine. So naturally, they viewed it with greater seriousness. And besides, there was no way to determine if the 2 cases were connected until preliminary testing was done. Testing that clearly had to be conducted by their team, since this was their jurisdiction. Of course, they would be more than happy to share results. Naturally, this was completely unacceptable to Matthews. He politely explained that the Broward team wouldn't know what to look for and could very well overlook or damage some critical piece of evidence, not out of incompetence or stupidity, Of course not. Matthews was certain Broward's people were perfectly capable in every respect. Naturally, Moon didn't take this particularly well. He remarked, somewhat coldly, that Matthews' comments seemed to suggest Broward was staffed by second-rate nobodies, to which Captain Matthews, in a moment of astonishing diplomacy, replied, "Oh no, not second-rate." I'm fairly certain the exchange would have ended in a fistfight had it not been for the timely arrival of a representative from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE. The FDLE is sort of like the FBI, but on a state level. They can investigate anywhere in Florida at any time, and unlike the feds, they're usually respected by local cops. The officer in question was an average-looking guy. Clean-shaven head, neatly trimmed beard. He didn't seem particularly remarkable to me. But when he stepped between the two burly captains, both immediately fell silent and stepped back. In short, he brought everything back under control. And so we returned to a neat, orderly crime scene. Exactly what you want for a good, old-fashioned serial murder. The FDLE officer ruled that this was officially a Miami-Dade investigation, unless and until the tissue samples from the remains proved there was no connection between the bodies found here and the heads found there, which in immediate and practical terms meant Captain Matthews got to be the first person on camera once the press, already gathered outside in droves, was allowed in. Angel no relation showed up and got to work. As for me, I wasn't at all sure what I could contribute. And I don't mean jurisdictionally. No, I was more preoccupied with the event itself. It had given me a lot to think about, and not just the act of murder and dismemberment, though that alone was pretty compelling. But of course, I had already taken the opportunity to peek inside Stebbins' little house of horrors before the police showed up. Can you blame me, really? Be honest. I just wanted a quick look, take a sample or two, and try to understand why my charming, anonymous colleague had chosen to pile the leftover limbs there. So right after Stebbin had crawled out the door, writhing and groaning like a pig choking on a grapefruit, I eagerly returned to the storage room to see what had gotten him so work. This time, the body parts weren't neatly wrapped. Instead, they were laid out on the floor in 4 separate groups. And as I looked closer, I realized something truly fascinating. A single leg lay stretched along the left side of the storage room. Pale, with a blue-white hue, and completely bloodless. It wore a small, gold ankle chain with a heart-shaped charm. Truly eye-catching, unsullied by gore, a flawless piece of work. 2 darker arms, just as precisely severed, were bent at the elbows and laid alongside the leg, with the elbows angled outward. Beside that was the rest of the limbs, all bent at the joints and arranged in 2 large circles. The arrangement gave me pause. I blinked, and then suddenly it came into focus. I had to furrow my brow hard to stop myself from giggling like a little girl, just as Deb had accused me earlier, because he had spelled something. The arms and legs had been arranged into letters, and those letters, the 3 torsos, were then carefully placed below the word in 3/4 circles, forming a small, pleasant Halloween-style smile. What a twisted little bastard. But even as I admired the playful tone of the scene, I found myself wondering, why did he choose to display it here, in a storage room, instead of out on the ice, where it could have had a much wider audience? The storage room was reasonably spacious, sure, but still enclosed, just enough space for the display. So why? As I pondered that, the outer door to the arena clattered open. No doubt the first response team had arrived. A moment later, the door burst wide, and a blast of cold air from the ice rink rushed in, hitting me square in the back. The chill traveled straight up my spine, answered by a wave of heat moving along the same path. It skimmed over me like the lightest touch of fingers, reaching into the deepest shadows of my awareness. Something shifted down in the moonless dark where my subconscious lived. I felt the dark passenger agree intensely with something I couldn't hear or understand, except to feel it was connected to that primal urgency the cold air had triggered, the closing walls, and a sudden surge of rightness. Undeniably so. Something had just occurred that was entirely, exquisitely right, and it left the shadowy figure that played cat and mouse with me in the dark, feeling pleased, exhilarated, and content in a way I didn't yet comprehend. Hovering above it all was a strange familiarity, like something I had always known was waiting there. Nothing in it made logical sense, but it had always been there nonetheless. And before I could dig deeper into that flicker of revelation, I was urged to my feet by a short, stocky young man in a blue uniform. He had his weapon trained on me, very convincingly. No doubt the first officer from the new wave of cops now pouring in, since he sported a single unbroken line of black eyebrow across his face and no discernible forehead. I decided it would be very wise to follow his instructions. He looked like the sort of trigger-happy idiot who might shoot an innocent person or even me. So I stepped out of the storage room. Unfortunately, my exit exposed the gory little display behind me. The young officer took one look, then staggered away to find somewhere to deposit his breakfast. He found a large trash bin about 10 feet away and began emptying his stomach with deeply unpleasant retching sounds. I stood still, waiting politely for him to finish. Regurgitating half-digested food like that, it's a disgusting habit. And this, from someone in charge of public safety. More uniforms arrived shortly, and soon my monkey-faced friend was joined at the trash bin by several of his comrades. The chorus of vomiting was unbearably loud, and the stench was now drifting straight in my direction. Still, I waited politely, because one of the remarkable things about a sidearm is that it can still be used quite effectively by someone in the middle of retching. Eventually, one of the uniformed officers straightened up, wiped his face with his sleeve, and began questioning me. I was quickly cleared, pushed off to the side, and instructed not to go anywhere or touch anything. Captain Matthews and Detective LaGuerta showed up shortly afterward, and once they finally secured the crime scene, I felt a little more at ease. But now that I could actually go somewhere or touch something, I just sat and thought. And the things I was thinking were, surprisingly, quite troubling. Why did the display in the storage room feel so familiar? Unless I was about to return to that earlier foolish moment of the day and convince myself I had done this, I had no idea why it all seemed so unsurprisingly familiar. Of course, of course. Not even worth the time it took to consider. Absolutely absurd. So then, why did it feel so familiar? I sighed and experienced yet another emotion. Confusion over not knowing what was happening. I simply had no idea what was going on, except that somehow I was part of it. A discovery that wasn't very helpful, really, because it matched every other uncomfortable conclusion I'd already drawn. If we discard the stupid theory that I had done it unknowingly, and I had, then every remaining explanation became increasingly implausible. So Dexter's official summary of the case would read something like, he is involved somehow, but has absolutely no idea what that means. I could almost hear the tiny wheels inside my once proud brain derail and crash to the floor. Clang, clang, lovely. Dexter, off the rails. Luckily, I was saved from complete existential derailment by my beloved Deborah. Let's go, she barked. We're heading upstairs. May I ask why? We're going to talk to the office staff, she said. See if they know anything. They must know something if they have an office, I offered. She gave me a look, then turned away. Come on. Maybe it was the commanding tone, but I followed. We walked to the opposite end of the arena from where I'd been earlier and entered the lobby. There, a Broward officer was standing by the elevator. Through the glass doors behind him, I could see a few more people standing behind a security barrier. Deb walked up to the officer and said, "I'm Morgan." He nodded and pressed the elevator button. He glanced at me with no expression at all, a look that said quite a lot. "I'm Morgan too," I told him. He just stared at me, then turned to look back out the glass doors. A tinny bell rang. The elevator had arrived. Deborah stormed inside, jabbing the button hard enough to make the officer glance up at her. Why so cranky, sis?" I asked her. "Isn't this what you always wanted?" "It's just a busy work errand. Everyone knows that," she growled. "But detective-style busy work," I pointed out. "That bitch LaGuerta's poking around again," my sister hissed. "As soon as this errand is done, I'm back on the street corner." "Oh no, in your skimpy little outfit?" "In my skimpy little outfit," she muttered. Before I could craft a charming retort, we arrived at the office level, and the doors opened. Deb barged out. I followed. We quickly found the staff room, where all the office workers had been herded together to await the attention of noble justice. Another Broward cop stood guard outside the door, maybe to prevent the staffers from fleeing to Canada. Deborah nodded at him and stepped inside. I followed reluctantly, my mind still drifting back to my unsolved puzzle. A moment later, I was jerked back to reality when Deb tilted her head toward me and shoved a young, greasy-faced guy with impossibly long hair out the door. Naturally, she was isolating him for questioning, a classic police tactic. But to be honest, it didn't exactly excite me. I had a good feeling that nobody in that room knew anything meaningful. If this first sample was any indication, that assumption probably applied to both his life and the case. This was just one more meaningless task handed to Deb because someone thought she'd done a decent job. But she was still a nuisance. So they gave her something with a faint detective scent to keep her busy and out of the way. I was only along for the ride because Deb wanted me there. Maybe she thought my magical hunches could help deduce what these office sheep had for breakfast. Just one look at the kid's skin, and I could tell. Cold pizza, fries, and probably a liter of Pepsi. That diet had done terrible things to his face and gifted him with a kind of blank hostility. Still, I followed him and Deb as they headed for a conference room at the back of the building. There was a long oak table inside with 10 tall black chairs. A desk in the corner held a computer and some AV equipment. While Deb and her pimple-faced prince sat down and started exchanging glares, I wandered over to the desk. A small bookshelf sat under the window beside it. I looked out and down through the glass. I could see the reporters gathering, the patrol cars surrounding the entrance where we had entered with Stebbin. I glanced at the bookshelf, wondering if I could clear a spot and lean against it, letting my mind drift far from the interrogation. On top of the shelf sat a stack of folders, and on top of that, a small gray object, square-shaped, probably plastic. A black wire ran from it to the back of the computer. I picked it up to move it. "Hey," said the grumpy kid, "don't touch the webcam." I looked at Deb. She looked back at me. I swear, her nostrils flared like a racehorse in the starting gate. "What?" she said quietly. "I had it pointed at the entryway," the guy said. "Now I'll have to re-aim it. Jesus, why does everyone mess with my stuff?" "He said it's a webcam," I told Deborah. "A camera," she said to me. "Right." She turned back to the charming young man. "Is it still on?" He stared at her, still locked in his righteous frown. "What?" "The camera," Deb repeated. "Is it recording?" He sniffed, then wiped his nose with a finger. "What do you think? You think I wouldn't make sure it works? That thing costs $200. It works just fine." I looked out the window where the webcam had been aimed, while our young friend continued his grumbling rant. "I have a website and everything. cathouse.com. People can watch the hockey team when they arrive and leave." Deborah stepped up beside me, and looked out the window. It's pointed at the entrance, I said. Of course, our friend chimed in enthusiastically. Otherwise, how would people visiting my site see the hockey team? Deborah turned to look at him. After about 5 seconds, he blushed and lowered his eyes to the desk. Was the webcam on last night? My sister asked. He didn't look up, just mumbled, sure. I guess. Deb turned to me. Her computer knowledge was just enough to complete standard traffic reports. She knew I was a bit better at this sort of thing. How did you set it up? I asked the top of the young man's head. Does it store images automatically? This time he looked up. I had used store as a verb, so I must have passed his T. Images update every 15 seconds and save straight to the hard drive. I usually delete them in the morning. Deborah was now gripping my hand so tightly I thought she might tear the skin off. Have you deleted them yet this morning? She asked. He glanced away again. No, he said. You guys barged in, searched everything, started yelling. I haven't even checked my email yet. Deborah looked at me. Bingo, I said. Come on, she told the unfortunate staffer. Huh? Come here, she repeated. He stood up slowly, mouth slightly open, rubbing his knuckles. What is it? He asked. Could you please come over here, sir? Deborah said in her best seasoned cop tone. The guy moved quickly toward us. Can we see last night's images? He looked from the computer to Deb. Why? He asked. The eternal mystery of human intelligence. Because, Deborah said, slowly, deliberately, I think you may have caught an image of the killer. He stared at her jaw. You're kidding, right? No, really. His face flushed even redder. Can we see the images, please? Deb asked. He stood still for a second, then dove into his chair and started clicking. The screen lit up. He typed furiously, clicking like mad. What time should I start? When did everyone leave last night? Deb asked. He shrugged. There wasn't anything going on. Everyone left by, I think, 8 p.m. Start at midnight, I said. He nodded. Let's do this, he said. He worked silently for a moment. Come on, he muttered. This line's only 600 megahertz. They won't upgrade. They keep saying it's fine, but it's slow as hell and won't. Okay. He suddenly stopped. A black and white image appeared on screen. The empty parking lot below us. Midnight, he said. Eyes locked on the screen. 15 seconds later, a near identical frame replaced it. Are we going to have to sit through 5 hours of this? Deb asked. Skip through it, I said. ... I said ... Look for headlights or anything moving. Okay, he said. He clicked rapidly. The frames began speeding by, 1 per second. At first, nothing changed. Dark lot, a pool of light at the edge of the frame. After about 50 frames, something entered view. A truck, Deborah said. Our computer-loving friend shook his head. Security, he said. Next frame, the truck was gone. He kept clicking, images sliding by endlessly. Every 30 or 40 frames, the security vehicle made a pass, then nothing. After a few minutes, the pattern broke. A long stretch with no change. Damn, our greasy-faced friend said. Deb shot him a sharp look. Camera broken? He looked at her, flushed, and turned away. The guards, he said. Idiots. Every night. What is it? 3 a.m., maybe? They park across the lot and take a nap. He nodded knowingly while the frames flew by. See? Hello? Mr. Guard? Still doing your job? He made a wet, snorting noise that I assumed meant laugh. Didn't think so. He snorted again and kept clicking. Then suddenly, "Wait!" I shouted. On screen, a small van appeared in the frame, near the entrance below us. Next frame, a person standing beside the van. "Can you zoom in?" Deborah asked. "Enhance," I said, just before the kid could object. He moved the cursor, selected the shadowy figure, and clicked. The image zoomed closer. "You're not going to get much more resolution," he said. "Pixel density." "Shut up," Deborah said. She was staring so hard at the screen, it looked like it might melt. And when I stared with her, I understood exactly why. The frame was dark. The person was too far to make out clearly. But from the few visible details, something was eerily familiar. The way he stood, frozen mid-movement in the frame. Weight distributed evenly across both feet. The silhouette. Somehow, even with the blur, all the pieces came together into one horrifying answer. When a loud mental click echoed deep inside my brain like a grand piano crashing down, I felt it before I even saw it clearly. It really looked like Dexter, Deborah hissed, a mix of disbelief and horror. Yes, it looked like Dexter. Chapter 23. I was quite certain that Deborah had taken the young man back to the staff room, because when I looked up again, she was standing in front of me, alone. Despite the blue uniform, my sister didn't look like a cop at all right now. She looked worried, like she hadn't decided whether to scream or break down crying. Like a mother whose golden boy had just deeply disappointed her. "Well?" she asked. I had to admit, she scored a point. "Not too terrible," I said. "And you?" Deborah kicked a chair. It toppled over. "God damn it, Dexter. Don't give me that smug, clever crap. Tell me something. Tell me it's not you." I said nothing. "Fine. Then tell me it is you. Just say something. Anything." I shook my head. There was nothing to say, so I shook my head again. "I'm pretty sure it's not me," I said. "I mean, I don't think it's me." Even to me, that sounded like the dumbest answer possible. "What do you mean by pretty sure?" Deb asked. "Does that mean you're not sure? That maybe it is you in the footage?" "All right," I said. Such a clever reply. "Maybe. I don't know." "And does I don't know mean you're not sure if you want to tell me? Or that you really don't know if it's you in the image?" "I'm pretty sure it's not me, Deborah," I repeated. "But I really don't know for certain. It looks a lot like me, doesn't it?" "Damn it," she said, and kicked the chair again. It banged loudly against the desk. "How the hell do you not know, for Christ's sake?" "It's kind of hard to explain." "Try." I opened my mouth, but for the first time in my life, nothing came out. As if everything else wasn't bad enough, I now seem to be running out of intelligence too. I've had these dreams like that. But Deb, I really don't know, I said, and maybe I even mumbled it. Damn it, damn it, damn it, Deborah said, and she kicked and kicked and kicked again. It was hard to disagree with her analysis of the current situation. All my stupid, self-torturing dreams came rushing back, blazing bright and mocking. Of course it wasn't me. How could it be? Wouldn't I know if it was me? Apparently not, dear boy. Apparently, you really don't know a thing. Because our tiny, dark little brain tells us all kinds of floaty stories, both inside and outside reality. But photos don't lie. Deb unleashed one more flurry of vicious kicks on the chair, then stood up straight. Her face flushed an intense red, and her eyes looked more like Harry's than I had ever seen them. All right, she said. So that's how it is. She blinked and paused for a moment, and both of us realized she had just spoken a very Harry-like line. For 1 second, Harry was here in the room, between me and Deborah. So different, the two of us. Yet, both his children, two strange fists in the only legacy he'd left behind. Deb lost some of her hardness. She looked more emotional, something I hadn't seen in a long time. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned away. You're my brother, Dex, she said. I was sure that wasn't what she meant to say at first. No one would blame you, I told her. God damn it, you're my brother, she snapped, and the intensity of it caught me completely off guard. I don't know what happened between you and Dad, what you two never talked about, but I know what he would do. Turn me in, I said, and Deborah nodded. There was something wet and shining in the corner of her eye. You're all I've got, Dex. Not exactly a hard choice for you, is it? She turned back toward me, and now I could see tears in both eyes. For a long time, she just looked at me. I watched a tear fall from her left eye and slide down her cheek. She wiped it away, stood tall, took a deep breath, and turned again to the window. That's right, she said. He would turn you in, and I will too. She looked away from me, out the window, off into the distance. I have to finish these interviews, she said. You figure out what this evidence means. Take it home to your computer and go over everything you need to. When I'm done here, before I go back on duty, I'll come by and hear what you have to say. She glanced at her watch. 8 o'clock. And if by then I have to arrest you, I will. She looked at me for a long time. God damn it, Dexter, she said softly, and walked out of the room. I went to the window and looked out myself. Below me, the police and press and rubbernecking idiots were still swirling about, unchanged. Beyond them, across the parking lot, I could see the traffic zooming along at Miami's speed limit, 95 miles per hour. Further still, the high outlines of Miami's skyline shimmered in the haze. And here, in the foreground, stood a blurry Dexter, stunned, staring out a window at a city that would never speak, and would never tell him anything, even if it did. God damn it, Dexter. I don't know how long I stood there staring. But eventually, I remembered that no answers were coming from out there. However, they might still be inside the Greasy Boy's computer. I turned back to the desk. The computer had a CD burner. In the top drawer, I found a stack of blank CDs. I inserted one into the drive, copied all the image files onto it, then removed the disc and held it up, staring at it. There wasn't much to say about the CD itself, though I imagined I heard a soft, disapproving tisk from the dark voice in the back seat. Just to be safe, I deleted the image files from the hard drive. On my way out, the Broward County cops standing guard didn't stop me, or even speak. But I could swear they watched me with a sharp, suspicious indifference. I wondered what having a conscience might feel like. I guessed I would never really know. Not like poor Deborah. Torn between loyalties no mind should have to balance. I admired her decisiveness, giving me the choice of whether the evidence meant anything. Very clear, very hairy, like leaving a loaded gun on the table in front of a guilty friend and walking away, knowing the guilty would save the city the cost of a trial. In Harry's world, no conscience could survive that kind of disgrace. But as Harry knew all too well, his world had long since died. And I had no conscience, no shame, no guilt. All I had was a CD with some images on. And of course, those images meant even less than a conscience. There had to be some explanation that didn't involve the theory that Dexter had driven a truck around Miami in his sleep. Granted, most drivers seemed to do just that, but at least they were half awake when they got behind the wheel, right? And here I was, with bright eyes and cheery thoughts. There was no way I was the type to drift through the city unconscious, killing people. No, I was the type who liked to be fully awake for every moment of it. To cut to the bottom line, there was still that night on the causeway. Physically, it was impossible that I had tossed ahead into my own car, right? Unless I had somehow convinced myself I could be in two places at once, which seemed plausible, if the only remaining explanation I could think of was that I had simply sat there in my car, watching someone throw a head into it, when in fact it was me who had done it. And then, no, that was absurd. I couldn't ask the tiny remaining piece of my brain to believe in that fairy tale. There had to be a very simple, rational explanation, and I would find it. So even though it sounded like a man trying to convince himself there's nothing under the bed, I said the thought out loud. There is a simple, rational explanation, I said to myself. Because you never know who might be listening, I added, and there's nothing under the bed. But once again, the only response was a heavily suggestive silence from the dark passenger. Despite the usual gleeful bloodlust of other drivers, I found no answers on the drive home. Or, to be perfectly honest, I found no answers that made any sense. There were plenty of stupid ones, but they all orbited the same central premise, that something was terribly wrong inside the skull of our favorite monster. And I found that awfully hard to accept. Perhaps simply because I didn't feel any crazier than I ever had before. I hadn't noticed any missing gray matter. Didn't seem to be thinking slower or weirder. And I hadn't yet had any conversations with invisible friends. Except in my sleep, of course, which begs the question, does that really count? Aren't we all insane in our dreams anyway? What is sleep, after all, if not the process of sinking the insane part of ourselves into a deep, dark, unconscious hole and emerging on the other side, ready to enjoy breakfast cereal instead of the neighbor's kids? And apart from the dreams I'd had, everything else made sense. Someone had thrown the head into my car on the causeway, left a Barbie doll in my apartment, arranged the bodies in a taunting way. Someone, not me. Someone other than your friendly neighborhood Dark Dexter. And ultimately, that someone had been caught. Right here, on a CD full of images. I could look at those photos and prove once and for all that the killer very possibly looked just like me. Well done, Dexter. Very well done. I told you there was a rational explanation. Someone else really was me. Of course, makes perfect sense, right? I arrived home and stepped cautiously into the apartment. It didn't look like anyone had been waiting. Of course not. There was no reason to expect that. But just knowing that the satanic force terrorizing the city knew where I lived made me feel more than a little uneasy. He had already proven he could do anything. He could even come in and leave more doll parts whenever he felt like it, especially if he was me. But of course, he wasn't. He couldn't be. The photos would show some small detail that would prove the resemblance was coincidental. Just like my strange intuition about the murders was purely accidental. No doubt about it, this was clearly a series of bizarre, freakish coincidences with a perfectly logical explanation. Maybe I should call the Guinness Book of Records. I wasn't sure what the world record was for not being certain whether or not you're the serial killer in a string of homicides. I put on a Philip Glass CD and sat down in a chair. The music stirred the emptiness inside me, and after a few minutes, something like my usual cold, calm reasoning returned. I went to the computer and powered it up. I loaded the CD and looked at the photos, zooming in, zooming out, trying everything I knew to make the images clearer. I tried techniques I'd only heard of, and a few I made up on the spot, but nothing worked. In the end, I was no closer than when I started. It simply wasn't possible to enhance the resolution enough to make the face in the image clear. Still, I stared at the photos. I turned them at different angles. I printed them out and held them up to the light. I did everything a normal person might do. And while I was mildly pleased with how well I mimicked that, I discovered nothing except that the man in the image looked like me. I couldn't even get a clear impression of what the man was wearing. He had on a shirt that might have been white, beige, or even light blue. The lighting in the garage had hit him with a harsh glare from a security argon lamp that gave everything a weird pink-orange glow. That, along with the poor image quality, made it impossible to be certain. He wore light-colored pants with a wide cut, basically an outfit anyone might wear, including me. I owned quite a few of those, enough to clothe a whole platoon of Dexter lookalikes. I did manage to enlarge part of the truck's side, enough to make out the letters A, and beneath it a B, followed by an R and either a C or an O. But the truck was angled away from the camera, and that was all I could see. None of the other photos gave me a single clue. I went through the whole sequence again, the man disappearing, reappearing, and the small truck driving off. No good angles. No lucky flukes that might reveal a license plate. And no reason to assume that it wasn't a sleepwalking Dexter in that truck. Eventually, when I looked away from the computer screen, night had fallen outside. It was completely dark now, and I did what any normal person would have done hours ago. I gave up. There was nothing left to do but wait for Deborah. I'd have to let my poor, conscience-racked foster sister drag me off to jail. After all, one way or another, I was guilty. I probably should be locked up. Maybe I'd even get to share a cell with Mikhail. He could teach me the rat dance. And with that thought, I did something truly miraculous. I fell asleep. Chapter 24. I had no dreams. No sense of leaving my body. No parades of grotesque images or headless, bloodless corpses. Not even dancing gumdrops in my head. Nothing at all in there. Not even me. Just deep, infinite black sleep. And yet when the phone rang and snapped me awake, I knew it was Deborah calling, and I knew she wasn't coming. My hand was already slick with sweat as I picked up the receiver. "Yes," I said. "This is Captain Matthews." The voice said, "I need to speak with Detective Morgan, please." "She's not here," I replied, and a heavy part of me sank under the weight of that statement and all it implied. Well, all right, that's not. When did she leave? I glanced instinctively at the clock. It was 9:15, and the sweat started pouring again. "She never arrived," I told the captain, "but she logged that she was going to see you. She's on duty. She should be there." "She never came." "Ah, God damn it," the captain said. "She said you had some evidence." "I do," I said, and I hung up. I really did have some evidence. I was horribly certain of that. I just didn't know exactly what it was. But I had to find out, and I didn't think I had much time. More accurately, I didn't think Deb had much time. Once again, I didn't understand how I knew that. I hadn't consciously told myself, he has Deborah. There were no flashing mental images of her impending doom. I didn't need to experience any fragmented awareness or think, well, she should be here by now. This isn't like her. I just knew, the way I'd known when I woke up, that Deb had been on her way to see me and never made it. I knew what that meant. He had her. He had taken Deb entirely for my benefit. This I knew. He was circling closer and closer, breaking into my apartment, leaving little messages with his victims, toying with me through clues and symbols of what he was doing. And now, he was as close as he could possibly be, without being in the same room. He had Deb, and he was waiting with her, waiting for me. But where? And how long would he wait before getting impatient and starting the game without me? Without me, I knew exactly who his playmate would be. Deborah. My sister had shown up at my place in full costume, playing the part of a hooker. Truly a gift-wrapped offering. He probably thought it was Christmas. He had her, and she would be his special guest tonight. I didn't want to imagine my sister that way, gagged with duct tape, tied down, forced to witness in horror as her body was slowly, gruesomely dismantled. But that's how it would go. Under different circumstances, it might have made for a fantastic evening's entertainment, but not with Deborah. I absolutely didn't want that. I didn't want him to do something irreversible and exquisite, not tonight. Maybe later, with someone else, when we knew each other a little better, but not now, not Deborah. With that thought, everything seemed a little better. How nice to have that settled. I wanted my sister alive, rather than in neat, little bloodless pieces. How sweet of me. Almost human. So now that this was settled, what next? I could call Rita, catch a movie, maybe take a walk in the park. Or, let's see now, maybe rescue Deborah? Yes, that sounded like fun. But how? Of course I had some clues. I knew how he thought. After all, I thought that way too. And he wanted me to find him. He had sent that message loud and clear. If I could just get all the stupid noise out of my head, the dreams, the mystical New Age chase, all of it, then I was sure I could figure out where he was. Logically, precisely. He wouldn't have taken Deb unless he believed he'd already given me everything a clever monster needs to track him down. All right then, smart Dexter. Find him. Follow the trail of Deb's kidnapper. Let your flawless reasoning hunt like a pack of snowy wolves. Fire up that mighty brain. Let the wind howl through its magnificent nerves as it draws the inevitable, beautiful conclusion. Go, Dexter. Go, Dexter. Hello? Anybody home? Apparently not. I heard no wind whistling through neural corridors. I was empty, as if I had never existed. No whirling maelstrom of stirred-up emotions, of course. I had none to stir. But the result was no less miserable. I was blank, drained, and feeling something close to actual despair. Deborah was gone. My sister was in terrible danger, being turned into an extraordinary piece of performance art. And her only hope of surviving in any form beyond a few forensic snapshots on a lab bulletin board was her hopeless, slack-jawed foster brother, whose brain had frozen solid. Poor drooling Dexter, slumped in a chair, while his thoughts ran in circles, chasing their tail and howling at the moon. I took a deep breath. If there had ever been a moment I needed to be myself, it was now. I clenched, focused, steadied myself, and as some tiny part of Dexter returned to fill the emptiness inside my skull, I realized how utterly human and stupid I had become. There was no great mystery here. In fact, the answer was so obvious. My friend had done everything but send a formal engraved invitation. You are cordially invited to the slicing of your sister. Optional, Black Heart RSVP. But even that brief moment of clarity was shoved aside by a new thought crawling in, reeking of rotting logic. I had been asleep when Deb disappeared. Did that mean I had done it again without knowing? What if I had carried Deb's parts somewhere, stacked them in a tidy little freezer locker and... Locker? Where did that come from? That feeling of confinement, the logic of the storage room near the hockey rink, that chill across my spine. Why did it bother me? Why did I keep returning to it? Because no matter what else happened, I kept circling back to that absurd memory and had no idea why it existed. What did it mean? Why did I care? Because whether it meant something or not, it was all I had. I needed to find a place that matched that cold, that pressure, that tightness. There was no other option. I had to find it. The place where I'd find Deb, or myself, or someone who wasn't me. Was it really that simple? No, of course it wasn't. This was idiotic. There was no reason to waste time decoding mystical dream messages. Dreams weren't real. They didn't leave Freddy Krueger claw marks in the physical world. I was not good at darting out of the house and driving randomly like some maniac. I was a cold, rational being. So in that cold, rational way, I locked up the apartment and walked to my car. I still didn't know where I was going, but the urgency to get there now had yanked the reins and was whipping me forward, down into the building's garage, toward my car. But when I was 20 feet away, I froze, like I'd hit an invisible wall. The dome light inside the car was on. I hadn't left it on. I'd parked during the day, and all the doors had been shut tight. A careful thief would have left a door ajar to avoid the sound of slamming it shut. I approached slowly, unsure what I expected to see, or whether I even wanted to see it. From 5 feet away, I could see something on the passenger seat. I crept around the car, leaned in, nerves taut as piano wire, and peeked. It was there. Another Barbie doll. I was slowly building an entire collection. This one wore a tiny sailor hat, a midriff bearing top, and tight pink pants. In one hand, she held a small suitcase with the word Canard printed on the side. I opened the car door and picked up the doll. I removed the tiny suitcase from Barbie's hand and opened it. Something small fell out and rolled onto the car floor. I picked it up. It looked terrifyingly like Deborah's class ring. Inside the band were the initials DM, her initials. I collapsed into the seat, clutching the Barbie doll in my sweaty hands. I flipped it over. I bent its legs. I waved its arms. What did you do last night, Dexter? Oh, I played with my dolls, while a friend of mine chopped my sister into pieces. I didn't waste time wondering how this sailor Barbie / streetwalker managed to end up in my car. This was clearly a message or a clue. But real clues are supposed to point somewhere, and this one felt misleading. Obviously, he had Debbie, but Cunard? How was that supposed to connect to some cold, cramped murder space? I couldn't see the connection, but there was really only one place in Miami that matched. I drove back up Douglas and turned right through Coconut Grove. I had to slow down and weave my way through a parade of happy idiots dancing between shops and cafes. They all seemed to have far too much time and money and very little else worth caring about. It took me longer than usual to get through them, but it was hard to get too angry since I honestly didn't know exactly where I was going. I headed somewhere, driving down Bayfront Drive, onto Brickell, and into the city. I didn't see any big neon signs with flashing arrows and encouraging words pointing the way. This way to the dismemberment site. But I kept going, past the American Airlines Arena, and just above it, the MacArthur Causeway. A quick glance toward the arena revealed the upper deck of an ocean liner in government cut. It wasn't a Cunard Line's ship, of course, but still, I kept scanning, looking for a sign. It seemed clear I wasn't being led to an actual cruise ship. Too crowded, too many officials swarming. But somewhere nearby, somewhere associated with ships, that had to mean something, right? No further clues. I stared hard enough at the ship to melt its hull, but Deborah didn't come skipping down the gangway. I kept watching. Beside the ship, massive cargo cranes rose into the night sky like abandoned Star Wars props. A little farther out, stacks of shipping containers were barely visible in the shadows beneath the cranes, piled chaotically, like some giant child had thrown over a toy chest full of building blocks in a fit of boredom. Some of those containers were refrigerated, and beyond them, back up a little, dear boy, who was whispering to me, murmuring those soft words to lonely Dexter driving in the dark, who was sitting behind me now, with dry clicking noises ringing out across the back seat. And why? What message was echoing into my blank, muddled brain? The containers. Some of them are refrigerated, but why containers? What possible reason could I have to care about a bunch of cold, tight, enclosed spaces? Oh, right. Because my friend told me so. Could this be the place? The future site of the Dexter Birthplace Museum? With authentic exhibits, true-to-life realism, and a rare live performance by Dexter's one and only sister. I jerked the wheel hard, swerving past a honking BMW. I flipped my middle finger, finally driving like a true Miami native, and sped up over the causeway. The ship drifted to the left. The container yard was on the right, surrounded by chain link fencing, topped with barbed wire. I circled around to the access road, while wrestling with a rising tide of certainty, accompanied by a choir of faint battle hymns from the dark passenger. The road ended at a security checkpoint, well before I could reach the containers. There was a gate with a few uniformed gentlemen loitering beside it. No way through, without answering some very awkward questions. Yes, Sir, I'm just wondering if I could come in for a quick look around. You see, I think this might be the perfect spot for a friend of mine to chop up my sister. I drove past a row of orange traffic cones, about 30 feet from the gate, then turned back toward the main road. Now, the cruise ship loomed on my right. I turned left just before the bridge to the mainland and pulled into a large lot with a warehouse at one end and a chain link fence at the other. The fence was cheerfully decorated with signs threatening severe penalties for any unauthorized person entering the area, signed by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The fence led back to a main road running alongside a vast, empty parking lot in the dead of night. I slowly drove along the edge of the area, eyes locked on the distant shipping containers. They must have come in from overseas ports, requiring customs clearance, and access to them was heavily restricted. It would be extremely difficult for anyone to enter or leave this zone, especially someone transporting a suspicious load of body parts or something similar. Either I had to search somewhere else, or admit that chasing vague hunches inspired by a string of disturbing dreams and a scantily dressed Barbie doll was a complete waste of time. The sooner I admitted that, the better chance I had of finding Deb. My sister wasn't here. There was no reason she would be. At last, I had a rational thought. I felt a little better, and might have even felt smug about it, if I hadn't just seen a familiar truck parked just inside the fence, positioned perfectly to show the side lettering. Alonzo Brothers. My private choir was singing so loudly in the basement of my brain that I couldn't even hear myself chuckle dumbly. So I stopped the car and parked. The smart guy part of me was banging on the front of my skull, shouting, "Move it, move it, let's go." But my instinct crept up slowly to the window, whispering its cautious, wary tone. And so I sat there for a while, before finally deciding to get out of the car. I walked up to the fence, standing like a background extra in a World War II prisoner of war movie. My fingers curled around the chain links, hungrily staring at the things just a few yards beyond my reach. I was sure there must be a brilliantly simple way for a creature as clever as me to get inside. But it was a sign of my current condition that I couldn't string thoughts together. I needed to get in, but couldn't. So I stood there, gripping the fence, staring in, knowing full well that everything that mattered was right there, just a few yards away. I simply couldn't throw my oversized brain at the problem and catch a solution as it bounced back. Intelligence always picks the worst times to go out for a stroll, doesn't it? The alarm bells from the back seat of my mind went silent. I needed to move. Now. I was standing suspiciously near a tightly guarded zone at night. Sooner or later, one of the security guards would take interest in the sharp-looking young man peering curiously through the fence. I needed to leave, figure something out while driving. I backed away from the fence, giving it one last longing look. Right there, where my feet had been pressed against the fence, was a barely visible gap. The chain links had been snipped just enough to allow someone to slip through, or at least someone very human-like, such as myself. The cut was held together by the weight of the truck, keeping it from swinging open. This must have been done earlier tonight, after the truck was parked. My final invitation. I slowly backed away, feeling a lazy hello there smile drift onto my face like a mask. Evening, officer. Just out for a stroll. Beautiful night for dismembering someone, isn't it? I cheerfully walked back to my car, glanced casually around without focusing on anything in particular. Like the moon floating over the water. Whistled a happy tune as I got in and drove off. No one seemed to notice, except, of course, the Hallelujah chorus ringing in my head. I pulled into a parking lot near the cruise ship's office, probably about 100 yards from the handmade Little Heaven's secret entrance. A few other cars were scattered nearby. No one would notice mine, but just as I parked, another car pulled into the space next to mine. A bright blue Chevy with a woman behind the wheel. I sat still for a moment. So did she. I opened the door and stepped out. Detective LaGuerta did the same. Chapter 25. I'd always been good at improvising in socially awkward situations, but I had to admit, this one stunned me. I simply didn't know what to say. I just stared at LaGuerta for a moment, and she stared right back. Her canines slightly bared, like a predatory cat trying to decide whether to play with you or eat you. I couldn't think of a single response that didn't begin with a stammer, and she didn't seem in any hurry to speak either, so we both just stood there for a while. Finally, she broke the silence with a vague, double-edged question. "What's in there?" she asked, tilting her chin toward the fence, about 100 yards from where we stood. "Excuse me, detective," I blurted, perhaps hoping she hadn't hurt herself. "What are you doing here?" "I followed you." "What's in there?" "In there?" I repeated. A dumb response, I knew. But honestly, my supply of clever lines had run dry, and I couldn't expect myself to whip up something witty in this moment. She tilted her head, slowly ran her tongue along her lower lip, from left to right, then back again, and finally pulled it back into her mouth. Then she nodded. "You must think I'm stupid," she said. And sure, the thought had crossed my mind once or twice, but it didn't seem polite to admit it. "But you need to remember," she continued, "I'm a licensed detective, and this is Miami. How do you think I got here?" "Your looks, maybe?" I offered, flashing her a brilliant smile. Complimenting a woman never hurts. She flashed back her own dazzling teeth, shining even brighter under the high-intensity security lights flooding the lot. "Nice," she said, curling her lips into a crooked smirk that hollowed her cheeks and made her look much older. "That's the bullshit that made me think you liked me." "I do like you, detective," I told her, maybe a little too enthusiastically. She didn't seem to hear, but then you threw me to the floor like I was a pig. I started wondering what was wrong with me. Did I have bad breath? And then I realized the problem wasn't me. It was you. There's something wrong with you. Of course, she was right, but hearing her say it still stung. What do you mean? She shook her head again. Sergeant Dokes wants to kill you, and he doesn't even know why. I should have listened to him. There's something wrong with you, and somehow you're involved in the Hooker murders. Involved? What do you mean? This time there was a wild gleam of delight in her smile, and a bit of her accent slipped back into her voice. Save the sweet guy act for your lawyer, and maybe a judge, because I think this time I've got you. She stared at me for a long moment, those dark eyes glittering. She looked as inhuman as I did, and that sent a chill down my spine. Had I underestimated her? Was she really this good? So you've been following me? More teeth. Yes, I have, she said. Why were you peeking through that fence? What's in there? Ordinarily, I might have anticipated this, but I'd been too wrapped up in the moment. Honestly, it hadn't occurred to me until just now. And when it did, it hit like a sharp flicker of pain. When did you start following me? From my house? What time? Why are you trying to change the subject? There's something in there, isn't there? Detective, please, this could be important. When and where did you start following me? LaGuerta studied me for a minute, and I started to realize that yes, I'd underestimated her. There was more to this woman than just ladder climbing tactics. She actually had something else inside her. I wasn't convinced that something was intelligence, but she was patient. And sometimes, in her line of work, that counted for more. She was willing to wait and watch, to ask the same question, again and again, until she got an answer. And then probably ask it again, a few more times, to see how I reacted. Normally, I could outmaneuver her, but I probably couldn't outlast her. Not tonight. So I put on my most polite, humble face and repeated, "Please, detective." She stuck her tongue out again briefly, then retracted it. "Fine," she said, "when your sister had been gone a few hours and left no note or word about where she went." I started thinking, maybe she'd found something, and I knew she wouldn't do anything on her own. So where would she go? She raised an eyebrow at me, then continued with smug satisfaction. "To your place, of course, to talk to you." She nodded, visibly pleased with her brilliant deduction. So I started thinking about you, about how you're always around, always poking your nose in, even when you don't need to. How you've sometimes solved other serial cases. Except this one. Then how you played me with that ridiculous suspect list, made me look like a fool, and shoved me onto that filthy flue. Her face darkened, looking older again for a moment. Then she smiled and carried on. I said something out loud in my office, and Sergeant Dokes said, "I warned you about that guy, but you didn't listen." Suddenly I saw your pretty boy face everywhere, and it just didn't sit right. She shrugged. "So I followed you." "When? What time exactly? Do you remember?" "No," she said. "But I was there for about 20 minutes before you came out, played with your little lesbian Barbie doll, and drove off to here. 20 minutes. So she hadn't been there in time to see who or what had taken Deborah. Most likely, La Guerta was telling the truth, and she had followed me simply to see. To see what? But why follow me? She shrugged. You're involved in this. Maybe you didn't do it. I don't know, but I'll find out. Part of what I uncover will lead back to you. So what's in there? In those containers? Are you going to tell me? Or are we going to stand here all night? In her own way, she had put her finger on exactly the right spot. We couldn't stand there all night. We absolutely couldn't. I was sure of it. Stand here much longer before something terrible happened to Deborah. If it hadn't already. We needed to go. Now. Find him and stop him. But how could I do that with La Guerta constantly trailing behind me? I felt like a meteor dragging an unwanted tail. I took a deep breath. Rita had once dragged me to a New Age health awareness workshop where they stressed the importance of deep breathing to cleanse the body. I tried one. It didn't make me feel any cleaner, but at least it shocked my brain into a quick action and made me realize I had to do something I rarely did. Tell the truth. La Guerta was still staring at me, waiting for an answer. I think the killer is in there, I told her. And I think he has Officer Morgan. She watched me for a moment, motionless. Right, she said finally. So you came here and stood by the fence to look? Because you love your sister so much you wanted to admire from a distance? Because I wanted to get in. I was trying to find a way past the fence. Because you forgot you work for the police? Ah, yes, of course. She'd hit the real issue, purely by accident. I had no proper answer. This whole telling the truth thing just never seemed to go smoothly, without a good dose of discomfort. I wanted to be sure before making a scene. She nodded. I see. Sounds nice, she said. But let me tell you what I think. Either you did something bad, or you know about it. Either you're trying to cover it up, or you're trying to solve it on your own. On my own? Why would I want that? She shook her head to emphasize how stupid that question was. To take all the credit. You and your sister. You think I didn't notice? I told you, I'm not stupid. I'm not trying to step on your toes, detective, I said, hoping she might have a shred more compassion than I did. But now, I was fairly certain she didn't. But I think he's in there, in one of the containers. She licked her lips. Why do you think that? I hesitated, but her cold, unblinking stare made it impossible to avoid giving away one more piece of truth. I nodded toward the Alonso brothers' truck, just inside the fence. That's his truck. Well, she said, finally blinking. Her attention drifted from me for a moment, seeming to wander somewhere deeper. Her hair, her makeup, her career. I couldn't tell. But there were plenty of sharp questions a good detective would ask at this point. How did I know that was his truck? How did I find it here? What made me so sure he hadn't just dumped it and left? But ultimately, La Guerta wasn't a great detective. She just nodded, licked her lips again, and said, "So how do we find him in all of that?" Clearly, I had underestimated her. She had shifted from you to we without any visible transition. "Do you want to call for backup?" I asked. He's very dangerous. I admit, I was mocking her. But she took it seriously. If I don't catch this guy myself, I'll be writing parking tickets in 2 weeks, she said. I've got my gun. Nobody's getting past me. I'll call for backup once he's in cuffs. She stared at me. And if he's not in there, I'm arresting you. That actually didn't sound like a bad deal. Can you get us through the gate? She chuckled. Of course I can. I've got my badge. It'll get us anywhere. And after that, now came the critical part. If she bailed, I could go home. Then we split up. Search until we find him. She studied me. I saw that same look I'd seen on her face when she stepped out of the car. The look of a predator, sizing up its prey, deciding when and where to strike, how many claws to use. Disturbingly, I felt a rush of heat under her gaze. All right, she finally said, jerking her head toward her car. Get in. I got in. She drove us back around to the gate. Even at this hour, there were still cars coming and going. Most seemed to be tourists from Ohio looking for their cruise ship. But a few had wandered too far and were now being turned around by security guards at the entrance. Detective LaGuerta bypassed them all, pushing her big Chevy to the front. Midwest driving skills were no match for a native Cuban Miami woman with full health coverage, driving a car she didn't care about. There were horns, a few muttered curses, and we were at the security booth. A tall, lean black security guard leaned out. Ma'am, I'm afraid you can't. She flashed her badge. Police, open the gate. Her voice was so sharp and commanding, I nearly stood up in my seat and ran to open the gate myself. But the gate guard remained frozen, exhaling through his mouth, then nervously glanced back into the guard booth. What do you want with? Open the damn gate, Rent-A-Cop, she snapped, waving her badge. And finally, he snapped out of it. Let me see the badge, he said. LaGuerta lazily held it up, forcing the guy to step forward to get a proper look. He frowned at it, but found nothing to object to. Ahem, he said. Can you tell me what you're looking for in there? I could, she said. But if you don't open that gate in 2 seconds, I'll toss you in my trunk and dump you in a holding cell full of horny inmates and forget where I put you. The guard straightened. Just trying to help, he muttered, then turned his head. Tabio, open the gate. The gate lifted and LaGuerta gunned it through. That bastard's up to something he doesn't want me to know about, she said, her voice tinged with excitement. But tonight, I don't care about smuggling games. She looked at me. Where are we going? I don't know, I said. I guess we should start where he left the truck. She nodded and accelerated down the lane running between the stacked containers. If he brought in a body, he probably parked close to where he wanted to go. As we neared the fence, she slowed the car, coasting quietly to a stop about 50 feet from the truck. Take a peek through the fence, she said. Shisting into park and hopping out as the car came to a halt. I followed her. LaGuerta stepped on something she didn't like and lifted her foot to check her shoe. Damn it, she muttered. I moved ahead of her, heart pounding hard and fast, and approached the truck. I walked around it, checking the doors, all locked. The two rear window panes were painted over from the inside. Still, I climbed onto the bumper and tried to peek in, but the paint was solid. No cracks, nothing visible from this side, so I crouched to look under the vehicle. I felt, more than heard, LaGuerta crawl up behind me. "See anything?" she asked. I stood up. "Nothing," I said. "The back windows are painted from the inside. Can you see in from the front?" I moved around to the front of the truck. Still no luck. Behind the windshield, two wide sun visors, very popular in Florida, had been lowered over the dashboard, blocking any view into the cab. I climbed onto the front bumper and up onto the roof, crawling from side to side. No gaps between the visors. "Can't see anything," I said, and climbed back down. "All right," LaGuerta said, eyeing me with narrowed eyes and a bit of tongue peeking out. "Which way do you want to go?" "This way," someone whispered deep inside my mind. "Come here." I glanced right, where those phantom fingers were pointing, then looked back at LaGuerta, who was watching me with a tiger's fixed, unblinking stare. "I'll go left and loop around," I said. "Meet you in the middle." "Fine," LaGuerta said with a wild grin, "but I'm going left." I did my best to act surprised and displeased. I guess I pulled it off, because she studied me a moment and then nodded. "Fine," she repeated, and turned into the first row of stacked containers. And then I was alone, with my cautious little friend inside. Now what? After fooling LaGuerta into taking the left side, what was I supposed to do with the right? After all, I had no reason to think it was better than the left, or even better than standing by the fence and juggling coconuts. The only thing guiding me was the whistling voice in my head. Was that really enough? For someone like me, a cold tower of pure logic, it would seem obvious that I'd rely on rational clues to guide my actions, just as naturally. I would ignore those melodic, illogical voices echoing from the deepest layers of my brain, trying to push me in that direction, no matter how urgently they hummed beneath the flickering moonlight. As for where exactly I should be going right now, I looked around, scanning the long rows of looming containers. On the side where LaGuerta had gone, there were a few rows of brightly painted truck containers. Ahead and to the right were shipping containers, stacked high and shadowed. Suddenly, I felt utterly uncertain. I hated that feeling. I closed my eyes. At that moment, the whisper turned into a chord of sound, and without understanding why, I found myself walking toward a cluster of shipping containers near the water's edge. I had no conscious impression that these containers were special or promising. No inner certainty this direction was right. My feet just moved, and I followed, as if they were tracing a path only toes could detect, or as if some inner chorus had begun chanting in mournful whispers, and my feet were obeying, pulling me along. As my feet moved forward, the sound rose inside me, a silent, frenzied scream, urging me to go faster than my legs could manage, dragging me awkwardly and clumsily through the crooked alleys between the containers with an invisible, but unrelenting pull. And yet, at the same time, another voice, a quieter, more reasonable one, was pushing me back, telling me I wanted to be anywhere but here, pleading with me to run, to go home, to get away from this place. And that voice made no less sense than any other. I was being pulled forward and yanked backward at the same time, so violently that I couldn't make my legs function properly. I stumbled and fell flat, face first, onto the concrete ground. I rose to my knees, mouth dry, heart pounding like a war drum, and paused to feel the tear in my beautiful Dacron bowling shirt. I pushed a fingertip through the hole and rubbed it against my chest. Hello, Dexter. Where are you going? Hello, Mr. Finger. I don't know, but I'm almost there. I hear my friends calling. So I got to my feet, legs suddenly trembling, and listened. Now I could hear it clearly, even with my eyes wide open. I felt it, so strong that I couldn't move. I stood still for a moment, leaning against a container. A very clear thought came to me, as if I desperately needed one. Something nameless had been born here. Something that had lived in the deepest, darkest corners of whatever made up Dexter. And for the first time I could remember, I felt afraid. I didn't want to be here, in a place where horrifying things hid in the shadows. And yet I had to be here, to find Deborah. I was being torn in half in an invisible tug of war. I felt like some child being used as a textbook illustration for Sigmund Freud, and I wanted to go home, crawl into bed. But the moon was screaming above me in the black sky, the water howling through Government Cut, and the night wind moaned across me like a chorus of furies, pushing my feet forward. The song inside me swelled, rising like a massive mechanical choir, pushing me on, reminding me how to walk, pressing me down the rows of containers like a machine. My heart hammered like a piston, breath short and ragged, too loud. For the first time I could remember, I felt weak, dizzy, and foolish, like a human, like a small, helpless human. I stumbled forward on strangely familiar paths, legs barely mine, until I could walk no farther. Again, I reached out and leaned against a container, this one humming with a running air conditioning unit, vibrating softly at the back, blending with the night's chorus, all so loud in my head I could barely see anymore. And as I leaned against it, the container door swung open inside, lit by 2 battery-powered lanterns mounted to the walls, was a makeshift operating table fashioned from tightly packed crates. And strapped motionless to that table was my beloved sister, Deborah. Chapter 26. For a few seconds, breathing didn't seem necessary. I just stared. Long, glossy strips of duct tape were wrapped tightly around Deb's arms and legs. She wore shiny, yellow shorts and a silk top, knotted at the waist above her navel. Her hair had been pulled back and tied tightly. Her eyes were opened impossibly wide, nostrils flaring rapidly, because her mouth was sealed shut with a strip of tape that ran straight across her lips and down to the table, pinning her head still. I tried to think of something to say, but realized my mouth was too dry to form words, so I just stared. Deborah stared back. There was so much in her eyes, but above all else, there was fear. It rooted me in place at the threshold. I had never seen that look on her before, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. I took half a step toward her, and she thrashed against the tape. Fear? Of course. But fear of me? I was here to rescue her. That much seemed clear. Then why was my sister afraid of me? Unless, had I done this? In that nap I took earlier tonight, had Deborah come to my apartment, as planned, only to find the dark passenger behind the wheel of the Dexter machine? Without even realizing it, had I brought her here, tied her to that table in some irresistible configuration, and had no memory of doing it? It made no sense, of course. Had I rushed back home, placed the Barbie doll myself, gone upstairs to bed, and awoken again as me, like a baton handoff in a relay race of murder? No way. But then how had I known to come here? I shook my head. There was no way I could have stumbled upon this particular cold container out of every possible place in Miami, unless I already knew it was here. And clearly, I did. The only reasonable explanation was that I had been here before. If not tonight with Deb, then when? And with whom? I was almost sure this was the place. A voice said, so much like mine that for a moment I thought I had said it, and wondered what I'd meant by it. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I finished the other half step toward Deborah, and he stepped out of the shadows. The dim light from the lanterns fell on him. Our eyes met. For a moment, the entire interior of the container twisted, and I wasn't sure where I was anymore. My gaze flicked from me, standing near the entrance, to him, by the makeshift operating table. I saw myself looking at him, then saw him looking at me. In a flash, I saw myself sitting on the floor, still and lifeless, and had no idea what that image meant. Uneasy. Then suddenly I was myself again, although I wasn't entirely sure what that even meant anymore. Almost sure, he repeated, his voice soft and cheerful, like Mr. Rogers' mischievous child. But now that you're here, that makes it the right place. Don't you think so? There was no clever way to respond to that. The truth was, I just stared at him, jaw slack. I was fairly certain I was drooling. I simply stared. It was him. No doubt about it. He was the man in the webcam photos, the one both Deb and I had thought could easily be me. Up close, I could see he wasn't me, not exactly. And I felt a strange twinge of gratitude. Hooray, I'm someone else. I wasn't completely insane. Deeply disturbed, certainly, and arguably a part-time killer, but not insane. There was another person. He wasn't me. 3 cheers for Dexter's brain. But he looked very much like me. maybe an inch or two taller, with broader shoulders and chest, like he'd done a lot of weight training. That, and the pale cast of his face, made me think maybe he'd been in prison. Yet beneath that pallor, his features closely resembled mine. The same nose and cheekbones, the same empty-eyed gaze that said the lights were on, but nobody was home. Even his hair had that same halfway wavy, awkward look. He didn't look exactly like me, but he looked close. Yes, he said. There's always a bit of shock the first time, isn't there? Just a little, I said. Who are you, and why is all of this? I let the sentence trail off, because I had no idea what all of this even was. He grimaced, a disappointed face that looked very much like one of my disappointed faces. Oh, come now. I really thought you'd figured it out. I shook my head. I don't even know how I got here, I said. He smiled gently. Someone drove tonight, didn't they? As my neck hairs bristled again, he clicked his tongue. A dry mechanical sound, unremarkable except that it matched exactly the voice that had whispered in the basement of my brain. And it's not even a full moon, is it? But it's not a moonless night either, I replied. Hardly brilliant, but in this situation, it felt like a decent effort. Then I realized I was buzzing with a strange sense of relief. Someone else knew. He wasn't making casual remarks that happened to land on my deepest thoughts. They were his thoughts too. He knew. For the first time, I could look across that vast gulf from my eyes into someone else's and say without hesitation, he's like me. Whatever I am, he's the same. But seriously, I said, who are you? His face spread into a smile, my smile, the classic Dexter Cheshire Cat grin. But because it mirrored my own so perfectly, I could see clearly that there was no real happiness behind it. Do you remember anything from before? He asked. And the echo of that question rippled against the metal walls of the container, so loud it felt like it might blow my mind apart. Chapter 27. Do you remember anything from before? Harry had once asked me. Nothing at all, Dad, except the swirling images in the unconscious part of my mind. Subconscious snapshots, dreams maybe, or memories, very vivid, whatever they were. And they were here, in this space? No, impossible. This container couldn't have been here that long, and I was completely sure I'd never been here before. But the cramped space, the cool air from the AC unit, the dim light, all of it echoed inside me like a familiar symphony. Not the same place, of course, but the scene was so clear, so similar, almost identical, except I blinked and something flickered behind my eyes. I shut them, and the interior of another container came rushing back to me. There were no cardboard boxes in this one, and there were things in it. There was something. Mother? I could see her face there. It seemed like she was hiding, peeking through those things. Only her face was visible. No frown, no blinking, no movement. At first I wanted to laugh. She was hiding so well. I couldn't see the rest of her, just her face. She must have dug a hole under the floor. She must have hidden in a pit, looking up. But why didn't she answer me, now that I could see her? Why didn't she blink? Even when I shouted her name, she didn't respond, didn't move, didn't do anything but look at me. And without Mother, I was all alone. But no, not entirely alone. I turned my head, and the memory turned with me. I wasn't alone. Someone else was there with me. At first it was confusing, because it was me, but someone else. But they looked like me. Both of us looked like me. But what were we doing there, in that container? Why wasn't Mother moving? She was supposed to help us. We were sitting there, soaked in a pool of dark. She was supposed to get us out, I whispered. Out of blood? He said behind me. You remember. I opened my eyes. My head was pounding, terribly. I could almost see that other space overlaid on this one. And in that other space, little Dexter sat right there. I could place my foot where he had been. That me sat beside me. But it wasn't me, of course. It was someone else. Someone I knew as well as I knew myself. Someone named Biney, I said tentatively. The sound was right, but the name didn't feel quite correct. He nodded, beaming. That's what you called me. Back then, you couldn't pronounce Brian properly. You called me Biney. He tapped my hand. It's okay. Having a nickname is kind of fun. He paused, smiling, but his eyes stayed fixed on mine. Little brother. I sat down. He sat down beside me. What was all I could manage? Little brother, he repeated. Born a year apart. You came after me. Our mother was a bit careless. His face twisted into a ghastly grin. Disturbingly cheerful. In more ways than one, he said. I tried to swallow. It didn't help. He, Brian, my brother, kept talking. There are some parts I had to guess, he said. But I had time. When I was encouraged to study something useful, I did. I'm very good with computers. I found the old police files. Our beloved mother ran with a rough crowd. Import business, just like me. Of course, their merchandise was a bit more sensitive. He reached into a cardboard box behind him and pulled out a handful of hats, each with a leaping jaguar logo. Mine are from Taiwan. Theirs came from Colombia. My best guess is our dear mom and her friends tried a little independent project with some product that technically wasn't theirs. Her business associates didn't appreciate her entrepreneurial spirit and decided to discourage her. He neatly packed the hats back into the box. I could feel him watching me, but I couldn't even turn my head. After a moment, he looked away. They found us right here, he said, right on this spot. His hand touched the floor, placing it exactly where the other boy, not me, had once sat long ago in that other container. 2.5 days later, dried into the floor in an inch of blood. His voice rose in a high-pitched, eerie whine as he said the word, blood, with the same disgust and horror I would have used. According to the reports, there were several men, maybe 3 or 4. One of them, maybe more, could have been our father. The chainsaw made identification tricky, but they were pretty sure there was only one woman, our dear mother. You were 3, I was 4. But, I said, and no sound followed. Exactly Brian said, and it was really hard to find you. This state's adoption records are a nightmare. But I did find you, little brother. I found you, didn't I? He tapped my hand again, a strange gesture I'd never experienced from anyone else in my entire life. Then again, I'd never met my actual brother before. Maybe hand tapping was something I should have been doing all along, with a brother or even with Deborah. And suddenly, I remembered Deborah. I turned to look at her, 6 feet away, still neatly duct-taped in place. "She's fine," my brother said. "I didn't want to start without you." It might be a strange first question to ask your long-lost sibling, but I asked, "How did you know I'd want to?" The question may have sounded like I actually wanted, and of course I didn't want to do anything to Deborah. Definitely not. But this was my brother, wanting to play. It was kind of a rare opportunity. More than just blood relation, far more than that. The truth was, Hiwa, you couldn't really know, I said, not as confident as I would have liked. "No," my brother said, "but I thought the odds were pretty good. The same thing happened to both of us." His grin widened. He raised one finger. "Trauma-induced development. You've read about that, right? Ever study up on monsters like us?" "Yes," I said. "And Harry, my foster father. But he never told me exactly what had happened." Brian waved a hand around the inside of the container. "This happened, little brother. Chainsaws, flying body parts, blood." Again with that same horrific emphasis. 2.5 days sitting in that. It's a miracle we survived, isn't it? Almost enough to make you believe in God. His eyes glittered. For some reason, Deborah squirmed and let out a muffled sound. My brother ignored her. "They thought you were still young enough to recover. I was a little too old. But both of us suffered a textbook case of trauma-induced development. All the studies agree. That's what made me what I am. And I figured it very likely did the same to you." "That's right," I said. "Exactly the same. Isn't it wonderful?" my brother said. "Family connection." I looked at him. My brother. That strange label. If I said it out loud, I was sure I would trip over the word. Completely unbelievable. And rejecting it would be even more ridiculous. He looked like me. We liked the same thing. He even shared my bitter sense of humor. I shook my head. "Yes," he said. "Takes a minute to get used to the idea that there are two of us, doesn't it?" "Maybe longer," I said. "I don't know if I can." "Oh, come on. Are we getting squeamish now? After all that's happened? 2.5 days, sitting here, good Lord. 2 little boys, sitting in blood for 2.5 days, he said. And I felt nausea churn through me, dizziness, my heart pounding, head pounding. "No," I said, covering my mouth, and felt his hand on my shoulder. "It doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is what's happening now." "What's happening?" I echoed. "Yes, what's happening right now." He made a strange noise, a sputtering, throaty sound, clearly intended to mimic laughter, but perhaps my brother hadn't learned to imitate it as well as I had. I guess this is the part where I'm supposed to say, my whole life has led to this moment. He made the sound again. Of course, neither of us can say it with actual feeling. Because really, we don't feel anything, do we? We've both gone through life playing a role. wandering through this world, reciting lines, and pretending we belong to a species we were never really part of. And always, forever, searching for a way to feel something. Searching, dear brother, for a moment just like this. A real, true, unfiltered emotion. It takes your breath away, doesn't it? And it did. My head was spinning, and I didn't dare close my eyes for fear of what might be waiting in there. Worse still, my brother was right beside me, watching, expecting me to be myself like him. To be myself, to be truly his little brother, to be my real self, I needed to what? My eyes automatically flicked toward Deborah. Yes, he said, with that cold, joyous madness of the dark passenger in his voice. I knew you'd get it. This time, we'll do it together, he said. I shook my head, but it wasn't convincing. I can't, I said. You have to, he said, and we were both right. That invisible touch settled on my shoulder again, nearly a perfect match for the push Harry had once given me. Though Harry could never have understood it, it felt just as strong. It pulled me to my feet, pushed me forward. One step, two. Deborah's unblinking eyes were locked on mine. But with that presence at my back, I couldn't tell her with certainty that I wouldn't. Together, my brother said, one more time. Cut ties with the old. Begin with the new. Move forward. Rise up. Step in. Another half step forward. Deborah's eyes were screaming at me, but now he was beside me, standing close, something flashing in his hand. Two somethings. One for all for one. Have you ever read The Three Musketeers? He flipped one of the knives into the air. It arced and landed neatly in his left palm. Then he held it out to me. The dim light gleamed on the two blades like fire, burning into me, just like Brian's stare. Come on, Dexter, little brother. Take the knife. His teeth lit up like blades themselves. It's showtime. From beneath the tight binding of duct tape, Deborah let out a muffled groan. I looked up at her. There was a frantic panic in her eyes now, and rising madness. Come on, Dexter. Was I really considering this? Cut her free and let's go home. Okay, Dexter? Dexter. Hey, Dexter, is that really you? I didn't know anymore. Dexter, Brian said. Of course I don't want to influence your decision. But ever since I found out I had a brother just like me, this is all I've thought about. You've thought about it too. I can see it in your face. Yes, I said, still not looking away from Deborah's terrified expression. But why her? Why not? What is she to you? Exactly. What was she? I stared into Deborah's eyes. She wasn't really my sister, not biologically. There was no blood connection at all. Sure, I cared about her. But what? Why was I hesitating? Of course this was impossible. I knew it was impossible, even if I was thinking about it. Not just because it was Deb, though yes, that was a big part of it. But a strange thought crept into my weary, tormented mind, and I couldn't shake it. What would Harry say? And so I stood there, torn. because no matter how much I wanted to begin, I knew what Harry would say. He had said it already. Harry's immutable law. Take out the bad guys, Dexter. Don't do that to your sister. But Harry had never envisioned anything like this. How could he? He never imagined, when writing Harry's code, that I'd one day face this choice. To side with Deborah, who wasn't really my sister, or join my actual, living, 100% real brother in a game I truly wanted to play. Harry couldn't have predicted this when he put me on this path. He didn't know I had a brother, someone who would be. But wait a minute. Listen. Harry did know. He was at the scene, wasn't he? He had to know, and he kept it to himself. Never told me I had a brother. All those long, empty years, I thought I was the only one, and he knew I wasn't. Knew it and didn't tell me. The most important truth about me, that I wasn't alone, and he kept it hidden. Now what did I really owe Harry anymore? After that unbelievable betrayal. Back, closer to the present, what did I owe the trembling piece of meat beneath me? This creature posing as my sister. What could I possibly owe her, compared to the bond that linked me to Brian, who shared my blood, my DNA, my precious mirror? A bead of sweat slid down Deborah's forehead and into her eye. She blinked furiously, squinting in discomfort as she tried to keep watching me while pushing the sweat away. She looked miserable, tied up and helpless in her duct tape cocoon, writhing like some foolish animal, a creature in human form. Nothing like me or my brother. Nothing like clean, clever Dexter, who never made a mess. The moonlight dancer with a spotless knife, just like his brother. Well, my brother said. I could hear the impatience, the judgment, the beginning of disappointment. I closed my eyes. The container spun around me, darker now, and I couldn't move. There was Mother, staring at me, unblinking. I opened my eyes. My brother stood behind me, so close I could feel his breath on my neck. Deborah looked up at me, eyes wide and motionless, just like Mother's. The way she looked at me latched on, gripped me, just like Mother's gaze had once held me. I closed my eyes. Mother. I opened them. Deborah. I took the knife. There was a small sound, a gust of warm air rushing into the container's cool space. I turned around. La Huerta stood in the doorway, holding a small, inconvenient-looking automatic pistol. I knew you two were going to try something, she said. I'll shoot both of you. Maybe all three, she added, glancing at Deborah, then back at me. Well, well, she said, eyeing the blade in my hand. Sergeant Dokes should have seen this. He was right about you. And she pointed the gun at me. Just for half a second, that was long enough. Brian moved quickly, faster than I thought possible. Even so, La Huerta managed to fire once. Brian staggered slightly as he drove the knife just below her diaphragm. For a moment, they both stood frozen. And then both collapsed onto the floor. A small pool of blood began to spread across the floor. A mingling of both their blood, Brian's and La Huerta's. It wasn't large, didn't spread far, but I jumped back from it. That awful liquid, in a state very close to panic. I only took 2 steps before I tripped and fell over something that made noises just as panicked as I felt. Deborah. I tore the tape from her mouth. God, that hurts, she said. For Christ's sake, get me out of this crap and stop acting like a damn psycho. I looked down at Deborah. The tape had left a red welt around her lips. That horrifying red blood that had pushed me backward into myself. Back into the memory space with Mother. And she lay there, just like Mother. Just like the last time. With the cold air of the container raising the hairs on my neck and the dark murmurs whispering around us. Exactly like the last time, in the way she lay there, bound in tape, staring, waiting like some... God damn it, she said. Come on, Dex, snap out of it. But this time, I had a knife. She was still helpless. This time, I could change everything. I could... Dexter, Mother said. I mean, Deborah. Of course I meant Deborah. Not Mother, who had abandoned us. Also in a place just like this. Left us here, where it had begun, and might very well end now. With the burning need to do it, galloping in on its tall black horse under the enchanted moon. 1,000 familiar voices whispering, do it, right now. Do it, and everything can change. The way it was meant to. Go back to. Mom, someone said. Dexter, come on, Mother said. I mean Deborah. But the knife was moving. Dexter, for God's sake, cut this damn stuff off. It's me, Debbie. I shook my head. Of course it was Deborah. But I couldn't stop the knife. I know, Deb, I'm really sorry. The knife rose higher. I could only watch it. Now there was no stopping it. Not for any reason. A faint echo of Harry cracked across my mind, ordering me to focus and stop. But it was so faint, so weak, and the need was so strong. Stronger than ever, because this was everything. The beginning and the end. Lifting me, pulling me out of myself, rushing me down the pipe, connecting the boy sitting in the blood puddle to the final chance to set things right. This would change everything. Would bring Mother back. Show her what she had done. Because she should have saved us. This time had to be different. Even Deb would have to understand. Put the knife down, Dexter. Her voice was calmer now. But the other voices were much louder. So loud I could barely hear her. I tried to lower the knife. I really did. But I only managed to drop it a few inches. I'm sorry, Deb. I just can't, I said, struggling to get the words out over the roar of a storm that had been building for 25 years. Now with my brother and I reunited, like lightning bolts in a dark and moonlit night. Dexter! Evil Mother cried, the one who'd left my brother and me behind, alone in the cold and hideous blood. My brother's voice howled from within, screaming with mine. Whore! And the knife shot up high. A sound from the floor. La Guerta? I couldn't be sure. It didn't matter. I had to finish, had to do this, had to let it happen now. Dexter, Debbie said, I'm your sister. You don't want to do this to me. What would Dad say? That stung, I'll admit it. But put the knife down, Dexter. Another sound behind me, a wet gurgle. The knife in my hand rose. Dexter, look out! Deborah shouted, and I turned. Detective LaGuerta was kneeling on one knee, gasping, trying to lift her suddenly heavy pistol. The barrel rose, slowly, ever so slowly, aiming at my foot, my knee. But did it matter? Because this was going to happen, no matter what. And even though I saw LaGuerta's finger tightening on the trigger, the knife in my hand didn't slow. "She's gonna shoot you, Dex," Deb yelled, panic in her voice now. The gun was pointed at my navel, LaGuerta's face twisted in a grimace of effort and pain. Yes, she was going to shoot me. I started to turn toward her, but my knife was still on its way down. "Dexter!" Mother and Deborah on the table both screamed, but the dark passenger screamed louder and stepped in, grabbing my hand to guide the knife down. "Dex, you're a good boy, Dex," Harry whispered softly, his voice raspy and ghost-like from behind me, just strong enough to nudge the knife upward a little. "I can't stop," I whispered back, pressing down on the quivering blade. "Choose what or who you kill," he said, his deep blue eyes now staring at me through Deborah's eyes, watching so intently that it was enough this time to push the blade another half-inch away. "There are plenty who deserve it," Harry said gently, his voice rising over the angry growl of the crowd in my mind. The knife's tip trembled and halted. The dark passenger couldn't push it down any further. Harry couldn't push it further away. We were locked there. Behind me, I heard a creaking sound, a heavy thud, and then a moan so hollow it drifted past my shoulder like silk brushing spider legs. I turned. LaGuerta lay on the floor, her gun hand pinned to the ground by Brian's knife. Her lower lip was caught between her teeth, her eyes filled with pain. Brian knelt beside her, watching the fear spread across her face. He was breathing heavily through a dark, toothy grin. "Shall we clean up, little brother?" he said. I can't," I said. My brother stood and staggered slightly as he stepped in front of me. "Can't?" he asked. "I don't think I know that word." He yanked the knife from my hand. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't help. His eyes moved to Deborah, but his voice slammed through me, striking the ghostly fingers of Harry, still resting on my shoulder. "It must be done, little brother. It has to be. There's no other way." He exhaled and bent forward briefly, then slowly straightened, lifting the knife. "Shall I remind you how important family is?" "No," I said, with both my families, living and dead, crowding around me, demanding I act or don't. With a final whisper from Harry's blue eyes in my memory, my head began to shake. Then I repeated it. "No, this time I meant it. No, I can't. It can't be Deborah." My brother looked at me. "Too bad," he said. "I'm very disappointed." And the knife came down. Epilogue. I know it's almost a human weakness, maybe nothing more than ordinary sentimentality, but I've always liked funerals. One reason is that they're so neat and tidy, carefully arranged with ceremonial precision. This one was particularly well done. Rows of police officers, men and women in blue uniforms, standing in solemn, crisp formation. Yes, it was full of ritual. There was the rifle salute, the careful folding of the flag, all the formalities, an appropriate and beautiful performance for the departed. After all, She had been one of us, a woman who had served alongside a proud few. Or was that the Marines? Doesn't matter. She had been a Miami cop, and Miami cops knew how to bury their own. They'd had plenty of practice. "Oh, Deborah," I sighed softly. Of course I knew she couldn't hear me, but it seemed like the right thing to do, and I wanted to do this right. I almost wished I could squeeze out a tear or two to wipe away. She and I had once been very close. It was a messy and unglamorous death. Not the way a cop should go, tormented to death by a mad killer. The response team had arrived too late. It had all been over long before anyone reached her. Still, in her sacrifice, she had shown how a police officer should live and die. I was quoting, of course, but that was the gist. They were fine words, truly moving if one had something inside that could be moved. Which I didn't, but I knew truth when I heard it. It blended beautifully with the quiet bravery of the officers in their spotless blue uniforms and the sobs of the civilians. I couldn't help myself. I sighed deeply. "Oh, Deborah," I sighed again, louder this time, almost enough to feel it. "Dear Deborah." "Shut up, you idiot," my sister hissed, elbowing me sharply. She looked adorable in her new uniform. Finally a sergeant, the least they could do for her, after all the effort she'd made in nearly catching the Tamiami butcher. With a warrant out for his arrest, surely they'd find my poor brother sooner or later. Unless he found them first, of course. Having just been powerfully reminded of the importance of family, I truly hoped he would remain free. Deborah would be hunting now that she'd accepted the promotion. She wanted to forgive me, and she was already halfway convinced by Harry's wisdom. We were still family, as that final moment had shown. Right? Not much further to go before she accepted me for who I really was. Things always turn out the way they're supposed to. Or rather, the way they always have. I sighed again. "Stop it," Deb hissed, jerking her head toward the end of the line of Miami cops standing motionless. I glanced in that direction. Sergeant Dokes was staring at me. He hadn't taken his eyes off me for a second, not even when he threw his handful of dirt onto Detective LaGuerta's coffin. He was convinced things weren't as they seemed, and I knew with complete certainty that now he'd investigate me, track me like a hound, sniff out every footprint, follow every trace I left, back me into a corner for what I had done, and naturally would do again. I gently squeezed Deb's hand, and with my other hand, I toyed with the cool, hard ridges of the glass slide in my pocket. A tiny, dry drop of blood that would not go into the ground with LaGuerta, but would live on forever in my collection. It gave me comfort and made it easy not to worry about Sergeant Dokes or anything he might think or do. Why should I worry? He couldn't control who he was or what he did any more than anyone else. He would hunt me, naturally. What else could he do? What can any of us do? We are all helpless, caught in the arms of our own little voices. Truly, what else can we do? I truly wished I could shed a single tear. That would be lovely, almost as lovely as the next full moon, when I would see Sergeant Dokes again. Everything would go on as it always has, just the same, under the bright and beautiful moon. The glorious, blood-red, melodic, perfectly round moon. The end. Dear friend, if you're lying quietly in your room, listening to the soft sound of rain, or just searching for a gentle story to soothe your restless thoughts before sleep, then let me tell you something strange. Something even I once found hard to believe. It all began on a late night, around 3 a.m., that hour when every street is silent. Every light has gone out. I had just left a friend's house. A short get-together, a few drinks, and conversations that stretched deep into the night. I should have stayed, but you know how it is. It's just a 20-minute drive. Sometimes that's the last thought you remember before everything changes. On the way home, I don't recall exactly what happened. There was no crash sound, no blinding flash, no dramatic moment like you see in movies. Just stillness and cold. Everything turned off. No sound, no weight, no body. I was still, aware, but I knew I was no longer alive, and in that space, where time had no shape, I met him, not the kind of him you've ever read about in holy books. And from that moment on, I was no longer afraid of dying. I was only afraid of what comes after death. I think what makes death so terrifying for many isn't that it's the end, but that we never know when it actually begins. One moment, you're thinking, planning, mapping out your tomorrow, and the next, there's nothing. Not pain, not screaming, not fear, just emptiness. I used to imagine what dying would feel like. Maybe you have too. Some people say you'll see your whole life flash before your eyes. Some say there's a tunnel of light, warm, welcoming, where hands reach out to guide your soul. But for me, there was no light, no warmth, no tunnel, just black. I remember I was still driving, the same road I'd taken home 1,000 times. No traffic. No city lights, just the soft beam of headlights cutting through a quiet, damp night. I remember yawning, and then something stretched. It felt like the world itself slowed down. My eyes were open, but everything ahead blurred. Even sound faded. And then, nothing. I didn't see the impact. I didn't see the truck coming. I didn't feel the crash or my body being thrown. I didn't hear glass shatter. Didn't feel pain. No scream. No blood. Just darkness. A formless, endless darkness. You might think I was asleep, but it wasn't like sleep. Not even close. There were no dreams. There was no mind left to even create a dream. It was more like I had never been born. A space where I didn't exist, and yet, somehow, I knew that I didn't. I tried to open my eyes, but realized I had no eyes. I tried to move, but I had no limbs, no hands, no feet. There was no body, no weight, no shape. Just awareness. Just the faint, drifting presence of me. I wanted to call out, but there was no voice. I wanted to pray, and in that strange moment, maybe seconds, maybe eternity, I just floated. I didn't know where I was, didn't know what was happening. There were no angels, no God, no judgment, no one calling my name. I used to believe that when we die, we'd see our loved ones again. But I didn't see anyone. I didn't feel warmth. I didn't feel safe. All I felt was awareness, and a quiet question echoing through the void. So, is this death? It wasn't like anything I'd prepared for. No cinematic moment. No divine embrace. Just stillness. Cold. Abstract. It felt like being removed from the world. Not gently, but without notice. I thought I'd panic. Thought I'd scream, beg, cry. But how can you panic when you don't even know if you exist? You can't be afraid if there's nowhere left to be. You can't be lost if there's no direction. You're just there, like a thought torn from a mind, suspended in nothingness. I didn't know what happened next. I didn't know if anyone. I didn't know if I was being saved, or if I'd already gone too far. All I knew was that everything I had been, the emotions, the memories, the name, the fears, the love, was dissolving like smoke, leaving only the rawest version of me, a bare fragment of awareness, drifting through infinity. I don't know how long I was there. Maybe minutes, maybe millennia. But then, something shifted. A tremble, so small, like the air itself had just noticed me. And from that nameless nothing, from it appeared. I don't know how long I was suspended in that darkness. A minute? A year? Another lifetime? In that place, time didn't exist. There was no light, no sound. The only thing left was me. And even that isn't quite true. It wasn't me as I had known myself. Just some vague fragment left behind after everything else had been stripped away. There was no shape, no voice, no eyelids to open or close. I didn't exist in any way we normally understand. Somehow, impossibly, I knew I was there. Strangely, I began to wake up. Not with a gasp or jolt like waking from a bad dream. It was slower, more like mist, gradually lifting, as if consciousness was unfolding layer by layer in silence. I couldn't see, but I knew there was nothing around me. No walls, no ceiling, no sky, no ground. Just a strange gray that wasn't quite gray. Not white, not black, just something undefined. I wasn't in a space, really. More like I had drifted into a concept. And then I realized this place had no life. There were no sounds because there were no things to make sound. No sense, no textures, no feeling of warmth or cold. And what frightened me most was realizing that I couldn't feel my heart beating. Not once, not ever again. No breath, no hunger, no thirst, no need to sleep, no need to use the bathroom. All the normal signs of having a living body were simply gone. I tried. Did I have parents? A partner? Where was I from? Where was I now? But my memories were like a torn map, scattered pieces floating around me, just out of reach. I knew I had once been a person. There had been a car, a late night, alcohol, a crash, and then that great, endless silence. I had no idea why I was still aware. If I had died, shouldn't I have stopped feeling, stopped thinking, just ceased? But I hadn't. I was still here, but no one else was. This wasn't heaven. No clouds, no harps, no celestial music. It wasn't hell. No flames, no suffering, no demons. Just a place with no name. Like a waiting room between dream and death. Hovering somewhere outside time. Just waiting. Or never waiting at all. I couldn't move, but not because I was bound or restrained. I had no body to move. I was just a single point of awareness, a drifting echo of consciousness. It had no eyes, no face, but I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Something else had entered the space. It didn't touch me. It didn't speak. It didn't move. It just observed. And strangely, I wasn't afraid. I thought I'd be afraid. This was an unknown place, far from anything I understood. But instead of fear, all I felt was stillness. Stillness so absolute, it cracked me open. And out spilled the questions. Am I really dead? If this is the afterlife, why am I still thinking? What's watching me? Is it God? Something beyond God? Where am I in the universe? Or have I left it altogether? I had no answers. No one answered. But the feeling of being observed, even without eyes, grew stronger. Not like being stalked, not like prey, but more like I was being studied, as if I were a strange life form trapped in a glass jar, and something vast and intelligent was examining me. Then, in the midst of that total silence, a message echoed, not with word, but like a thought, pressed directly into the core of my being. A message so simple, it didn't need interpretation. At last, you've arrived. I didn't know who you was. I didn't know who was speaking, or if it came from outside, or from somewhere deep within me. But from that moment forward, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. I was no longer alive, and wherever I was now was far beyond anything humanity could name. I used to believe that if I ever met God, It would be in some magnificent light. Perhaps a figure with a flowing white beard, kind eyes, and a gentle smile, just like the paintings. But here, in a place with no light, no sound, no time, what I met had no face, no eyes, no form, no gender, not a man, not a demon, not a thing at all. It was awareness, something that knew I was here and let me know it was here too. There were no footsteps, no sudden appearance, no scene to witness. But somewhere, from deep within myself, a presence began to rise. Like invisible water, slowly flooding my consciousness, soaking into every part of what I still was. It didn't approach. It didn't need to. It was everywhere. And somehow, inside me at the same time. At first, I thought it was a hallucination. Maybe just a final burst from a dying brain, creating comforting illusions in its last flicker. But no, this did not comfort me. It simply existed, as if it had always been there, long before I arrived. And then without sound or language, an impression pressed itself into me. I am. That was all. 2 words, no context, no explanation, and yet I understood. I am. Not I am something, but just am. A statement so complete, it required no further definition. It felt ancient, vast, absolute. I wanted to ask so many things. Who are, and I didn't need to, because it already knew everything I wanted to ask, before I even formed the thought. And again, a stream of awareness flowed into me. You are asking with the language of the living. But here, language no longer exists. Only truth remains. I fell silent. Or maybe I simply stopped trying to make words where none could form. All I could do now was feel and be felt in return. I tried to imagine what it looked like, but I couldn't. There was no shape I could attach to it. No light, no darkness, no large or small, no old, no young, just a limitless awareness surrounding and filling the silent space I existed in. And when I tried to give it a name, it responded simply, "You may call me God." I nearly wept, if I still had tears. Not from joy, not from reverence, but from a deep, sharp confusion. Because what I was experiencing did not resemble love, or holiness, or humanity. It did not embrace me, did not comfort me, did not judge me. It felt nothing in the way I understood emotion. It wasn't angry. It wasn't joyful. It wasn't proud. It simply observed. Like a scientist might observe a cell beneath glass. Not with hatred, not with love, but with curiosity. And that, more than anything, unsettled me. I had imagined that meeting God would mean a review of my life, that I'd be asked about my mistakes and my triumphs, that I'd be led somewhere, heaven, perhaps, or hell. But here, there were no questions, no crimes, no rewards, just me, an awareness, staring into something infinitely larger. I whispered in my mind, "Did you create me?" The reply was cool and precise. "I created all things, but not in the way you understand. I do not write scripts. I scatter seeds." Seeds? I thought. Like a gardener? No, like one who casts sand into the wind to see where it falls. That answer froze something inside me. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't warm. It was simply true. No destiny. No loving will. Just observation. And I realized something else. This God, this presence I was now in, did not exist to be understood. Its purpose wasn't to be known, but rather to confront us with what remains when nothing else can hide us from ourselves. I asked in one last effort of clarity, "So, where do I go now? Do I return? Do I have a choice?" There was no verbal reply. Instead, a soft opening. Not a door, not a tunnel, but a direction. A sensation of something flowing outward. Not blinding, not sharp, but definitive. An invitation or a path. I didn't know what it meant, only that it was different than this place. Something like returning, something like beginning again. And I knew I could step into it or dissolve into this stillness forever. By then, I could no longer hold on to the calm I had at the beginning. That unsettling stillness, I was no longer hovering in balance between curiosity and dread. I was breaking, not physically. I had no body, but something inside me was beginning to fracture. I stopped simply listening. I began to ask, am I really dead? Does my family know? Are they crying right now? Will I ever see them again? Why me? What did I do wrong? There was no voice, but answers still came. Not with warmth, not with mercy, but with pure data, clean, cold, precise, like a machine interpreting input. You are dead by the biological definition of your species. I braced myself, not to hold back tears. I had no eyes, no tear ducts, but to preserve some remnant of what felt human in me. But I'm still thinking. I remember who I am. I feel. I remember my name, my mother. I still remember my mother. Memory does not confirm life. Memory is residue. So what am I? A copy, a shadow. You are the remainder, where trying to shape those words into something digestible, but I couldn't. Each answer it gave was like a silent blade, severing every illusion I had used to protect myself. Will I see them again? My father? My brother? The woman I love? Are they here? Somewhere else? Each consciousness follows its own thread. There is no merging, no reunion as you imagine it. That answer froze me in place. So everything was temporary. Love, family, friendship. Why did we love if it all ends alone? Emotion is a biological function. Love is a survival mechanism, not destiny. I felt like I was floating in a nightmare, not because the truth was horrific, but because it was too logical, cold, clean, undeniable. So you created everything just to observe? There's no purpose, no goodness, no redemption. I do not require purpose. Things exist because they can. I am not good. I am not evil. I simply am. I wanted to recoil if I still had a sense of space. Dot. I wanted to curl up like a child, but I had no body, no limbs to hold on to myself. Only a raw, naked mind being stripped down to nothing. We suffer, we pray, sacrifice, endure. Is no one listening? I do not intervene. I do not promise. I do not answer. Suffering is reaction, not a test, not a punishment, only consequence. I wanted to scream, but there was no scream left, no mouth, no voice. I wanted to deny all of it, but there was no belief strong enough to override what I was now facing. This wasn't the death I expected. This was truth, not waiting for my permission to exist. I don't know how long I stayed silent. I don't know how much of me was left by then. But at some point, I stopped asking. Not because I had no more questions, but because I couldn't bear any more answers. Then something strange happened. I no longer felt it. This presence that had been responding. I no longer felt its thoughts, and for the first time since awakening after death, I was alone, weightless, still, as if the entire weight of the cosmos had finally stepped back. In that moment, I thought, or maybe I simply felt, a quiet realization. If everything I believed was wrong, then what do I have left to hold on to? And the only reply, not from anyone, was silence. I had been silent for a long time, not because I no longer had questions, but because I had realized something. Asking wouldn't change anything. Everything I had believed, everything I had hoped for, was no longer relevant in this place. This was not heaven, not hell, not a realm of comfort, not a place of punishment. This was a vast experiment. And God, the presence here, was not the kind creator we imagined. It didn't need worship. It didn't love us, but it didn't hate us either. It did not intervene. It did not fix. It did not guide. It did not promise. It simply observed. After what felt like an eternity of quiet, I felt the presence return. No pressure, no sound, no light, just a sensation, like a wind brushing against consciousness. I didn't ask anything, but it spoke again, in the way it always had. You have been still long enough to begin seeing. I wasn't sure what it meant, but something inside me began to shift. Not in it, but in how I saw it. I began to sense it as an ancient intelligence, beyond all morality, compassion, or even existence as we know it. Not human, not emotional. A pure awareness, functioning in dimensions beyond ours. And then it said, I do not reward. I do not punish. I do not save. I do not guide. I simply record. A cold ripple passed through me. Not fear, but clarity. I could no longer expect anything from it. Not forgiveness, not miracles, not meaning. I remembered the times I had prayed during life, during grief. Betrayal, despair. I had whispered to the sky, to something greater, hoping someone was listening. And now I knew someone was. But they never answered. Or rather, they heard, but did not reply. So I asked, gently this time, not with anger, why don't you intervene? You could save people, stop wars, end suffering. Why not? And it answered, if I intervene, I disrupt the potential for learning. That stopped me. You need to learn? Aren't you all-knowing? Omniscience is not having every answer. It is being able to receive them as they emerge. It didn't use words, but the meaning entered me like waves lapping at sand. God wasn't a being that already knew everything. God was something that waited to see what would unfold and then observed. A scientist of the cosmos, an eternal consciousness running experiments, but never tampering with the test. We humans were only one of countless, perhaps infinite forms it had watched. No sacred mission, no grand plan. There was only one truth that remained, the capacity of consciousness to evolve. I thought of all the people who had devoted their lives to faith, to the hope of salvation. And I realized perhaps it wasn't truth that kept us alive. It was belief. Belief itself may have been part of the experiment, a reaction, a tool for adaptation, a way for humanity to cope with the unknowable. So what are we to you? I asked at last. And it replied, you are a spark in a forest of darkness. I do not come to extinguish it. I do not come to fan it. I come to observe how it burns. I fell silent again. There was no more pain, no more resistance, just a feeling of release. I no longer demanded answers. I didn't need to know why I was here. I didn't need to understand what comes next. I simply knew I had met it, and that it was nothing like we thought. I once believed that humanity was the center of the universe, the peak of evolution, the reason everything existed, a species specially loved by God. But here, in this nameless, soundless space, where there were no promises, no heaven or hell, only stillness, I began to see a truth no one had prepared me for. We are not the main characters. I tried to believe we were special, that our love, our creativity, our pain, our hope must hold meaning to someone. That if there was a divine being observing us, surely they would be moved when we held each other, when we sacrificed, when we saved one another in moments of danger. But what I stood before now did not smile, did not cry, did not say, well done. It simply watched and recorded. not unlike a biologist watching microbes under a microscope. Not cruel, but not caring either. A stream of awareness moved through me again. No question this time. Only a comparison. You are like bacteria, fast to adapt, aggressive in survival, always replicating. If I still had a heart, I think it would have broken. Bacteria, not souls, not sacred beings, just a life form worth observing. I whispered barely, "So, is there nothing sacred about us? Nothing worth revering? The sacred is your construct. I do not label emotions. I record behavior." That answer hit me harder than any pain I had known. Not because it was harsh, but because it stripped me of everything tender I thought I had. I thought of all the mothers holding children in war, fathers going hungry so their kids could eat, strangers laying down their lives for someone they'd never met. I had believed, if there were angels, if there was God, surely they bowed before such acts. But no, no bowing, no reward, no acknowledgement, only data logged. A chill crept through every memory I'd ever clung to. I began to wonder, why do we try so hard? Why do we suffer, love, endure, if it earns us nothing? And the answer, though unspoken, was clear. But to be watched, like a chemical reaction, like an experiment running across centuries. I asked the question I had never dared ask in life. So, are we just an experiment? The silence stretched long, not because it didn't have an answer, but because I already knew it. And then the thought came. All sentient life is data. You are no more special than ants, no less than chimps. You are a complex sequence, worthy of observation, but not of direction. If I had tears, I might have wept, not because I was insulted, but because, for the first time, I felt completely stripped of every illusion. No divine favor, no leading role, no noble arc. We were just a variable. Then it added, a message not cruel, but strangely revealing. You are the only species on Earth capable of realizing you are not special, and continuing anyway. That is what makes you interesting. I stayed quiet for a long time. Not sad, not angry, just released. Like a child growing up and learning the world doesn't revolve around them. There's disappointment at first. Then, a cold sort of maturity. I no longer asked the universe to be fair, because now I understood it never promised to be. I once believed in God. Not always devoutly, but in my weakest moments, I prayed. Like millions of others, I looked to the sky and whispered, hoping someone was listening. I used to think religion was the bridge between us and the divine, proof that there was a plan, evidence that we weren't alone in the vast universe. But here, in this nameless void, under the cold gaze of something older than thought, I began to see a truth that froze every part of me. Religion wasn't sent down. It was imagined, created by humans to cope with meaninglessness. I don't remember when I first believed. Maybe as a child. watching my mother kneel in front of a family altar, hands pressed together, whispering words I didn't understand. As I grew, I learned about other faiths. Buddhism spoke of compassion. Christianity taught love and forgiveness. Islam emphasized surrender and discipline. Despite their differences, they all promised one thing, meaning that every pain had a reason, that every good deed would be rewarded, that death was not the end, that someone, somewhere, saw our struggle and cared. But here, in front of this, I realized with a quiet horror, it did not care. I asked, though I already feared the answer. So, are all religions wrong? The reply drifted in, cold and light. Not right, not wrong. They are responses from minds afraid of the unknown. And then I saw, not with eyes, but with awareness. Visions, feelings, memories. A primitive man trembling under a thunderstorm, begging the sky for mercy. A mother cradling her starving child, whispering to a god to make a miracle. A warrior dying in battle, believing his sacrifice would bring him to paradise. They weren't foolish. They were terrified. I felt it clearly. Religion is the immune system of the mind, a self-protective mechanism against the unbearable realization that no one made promises to us. No one owes us answers. There is no divine oath, no cosmic plan. What I saw before me did not bless, did not condemn, did not write scriptures. It simply watched, recorded, like an entomologist studying how ants build their colony. I asked, softly, as if confessing, do we need belief? The answer came, not to comfort, but to remove illusion. You do not need it. You created it because you could not yet accept truth without answers. I fell into silence, and I understood. Faith, miracles, scriptures, they weren't revelations from above. They were tools of survival for sentient minds not yet ready to face the void. We wrote holy books to fill the gap. We invented heaven to ease our fear of dying. We imagined Judgment Day to believe that evil would one day be addressed. But here, before God, I understood. No one authored that story. We did. We printed it. We taught each other to believe. And when we die, we discover the story was never mailed. In that moment, I wasn't angry, not disappointed, not defiant. I just felt empty. And strangely, that emptiness felt light. I didn't need to find meaning anymore. Didn't have to cling to prophecy. Didn't need to live trying to please someone watching from above. I only had to live because I was alive. I used to believe that even if nothing else in life was certain, at least right and wrong were. At least good and evil had to be clear. That killing was wrong. Saving someone was right. Lying was bad. Truth was good. But standing before this presence, this God without emotion, without shape, without morality, I began to realize there is no absolute in the universe. Not even good and evil. After a long silence, one that felt like centuries, I finally asked, "Then, how do you distinguish right from wrong?" The answer came like a breeze across my awareness. I do not distinguish. Those are constructs of finite minds. They are not laws of the universe. I hesitated. Then, ethics, rules, the things we live by, they're just illusions? Not illusions. Tools to organize societies, to preserve identity, to prevent collapse. I understood. We invented good and evil. Not because the cosmos demanded it, but because we needed a way to survive each other. I remembered what I had learned in school. Laws were not born from pure morality. They came from mutual fear. Religions, in their earliest forms, weren't bridges to the divine. They were systems to control behavior. So I asked what perhaps millions before me had wondered. So, is killing wrong, or only wrong from our point of view? And the answer chilled me. Killing is an action, wrong or right. That is how a reference frame interprets it. Then to you, what are evil acts? War, torture, genocide. What do they mean? There was no anger in the reply, no sorrow, just clarity. They are reactions of a disrupted system. Not evil, not good, merely data to be analyzed. I froze. The human part of me wanted to fight back, to scream that some things are undeniably wrong. But I realized that voice was ego, the part of me still clinging to the belief that justice was universal, that good must prevail. But to this being, nothing is universal. Then it showed me, not with images, but with insight. Other worlds, other species, other planets where sentient life had once thrived, where civilizations had grown, developed ethics, believed in right and wrong, and were then gone. Not because they were wicked, not because they failed a test, but because they stopped producing new data. Did you destroy them? I asked. Not destroyed, discontinued. When a system no longer produces meaningful outcomes, it concludes. I felt like something inside me collapsed. Not because of violence, but because of the quiet indifference of it. We live as long as we remain interesting. We persist as long as we produce something new. And good or evil, they're not requirements. They are internal myths we tell ourselves to feel that we are on the right side of the story. I thought about all the stories we cherish. The brave hero, the just war, the villain punished. All of them just internal narratives. Tales we create, celebrate, and cling to. The universe does not participate. Have you ever praised a world? I asked, almost shyly. And the answer was, no, I do not evaluate. I observe until there is nothing left to observe. I was quiet for a long time, not in shock, but because I felt myself unraveling, not in sorrow, but in a strange awakening, like someone who's lived inside a fairy tale and finally steps outside into a world without magic. No angels, no promises, no eternal justice. Only choices, people, and the stories we write for ourselves. I used to hate pain. Like everyone else, I tried to avoid it. We built entire civilizations just to minimize pain, physical, emotional, or psychological. We called that progress. Painkillers, therapists, religion, meditation, all of them, in some way, aim to do one thing: make us feel less. But here, in a place with no body, no nerves, no sound, I began to realize something that stunned me. It is pain that makes us human. I asked God, or whatever presence was with me, why must there be pain? Why do we suffer if you don't punish, reward, or judge? The answer came, sure and steady. Pain is an anchor. It's how consciousness clings to experience. Without pain, there is no learning. I didn't understand right away. But what about joy, love, satisfaction? Don't they teach us something too? Joy is a result. Pain is an imprint. Only pain leaves marks deep enough to shape memory. I thought about my childhood and realized it was true. I don't clearly remember the peaceful days, but I remember in detail. The first time I fell and bled. The first time I was slapped. The first betrayal. The first death I witnessed. Every sound, every look, every word, because it hurt. And then I understood. Pain is the brain's most effective memory mechanism. Not punishment, not cosmic discipline. Simply this: what hurts gets remembered. What is remembered changes us. What changes evolves. So, you don't care if we're happy? I asked. Not with anger, just curiosity. I do not need you to be happy. I need you to learn. And only pain compels your mind to absorb change. I felt something like compassion rise in me, but not for God. For the part of me that spent a lifetime dodging discomfort, chasing meaning, running from grief, all while carrying the seeds of growth I refused to see. I once thought happiness was the goal of life, but now I saw happiness is a brief reward, a resting place in a long journey built on pain. Not a destination, but a temporary shelter between storms of memory and insight. Do you ever feel pain? I asked, though I already sensed the answer. No, I do not feel. I record. Then do you understand it? I do not need to understand. I measure what it creates. And I realized this presence wasn't here to comfort, not to empathize, not to soothe. It was here to document. And in that documentation, pain was the most valuable metric. I looked back at the things I had once cursed: betrayals, days of emptiness, dreams that shattered, deaths I couldn't stop. I had thought, this is punishment. Now I saw this. I began to thank every scar in my memory, not because I thought them beautiful, but because I now understood. Without them, I would have nothing left to remember. After everything, there were no more questions, no more reactions, no more resistance. I had dissolved into what I used to call me. I had let go of justice, morality, destiny, reward, punishment, even love. I wasn't searching anymore. I was just here, in a place with no name, where tomorrow does not exist. And then it returned, not with footsteps, not with a voice, just a sensation, like an unseen gaze passing through my awareness. No explanations, no analysis, just a choice, given without words. You may stay or return. I knew what it meant. To stay was to remain in this dimension. No body, no time, no identity. Only pure awareness, continuing to absorb, to slowly fade into unspeakable truth. To return was to go back to the old world, with form, with limits, with pain, confusion, and forgetting, but also the taste of morning coffee, the sound of laughter, the warmth of an embrace. If I go back, will I remember this? I asked. Not clearly, but a trace will remain, a touch. Will it change me? Deeply. I hesitated. To stay was stillness. No more worry, no more wounds. A peace beyond emotion. To return was chaos, mistakes, loss, struggle, but also the only place where I might hug my mother again. The only place where, maybe on a quiet afternoon, I might hear the laughter of children playing in the street. I don't know why I chose what I did. Not for heroism, not for duty, not for destiny. Just a very small, very human feeling that I still had something left to do, even if I couldn't remember what. And then I felt myself pulled, not by force, but by intention. A current opened, gentle, unhurried, no color, no sound, just a path home. Before I crossed it, I heard one last thought, not spoken, but pulsing quietly inside me. When you return, you will not be who you were, but you will not remember why. Let the trace lead you. I began to fall, not fast, not frightened, but as if slipping gently back into something that once fit me. I saw light, not heavenly light, just the pale glow of a hospital ceiling and the faint smell of antiseptic. I heard voices, distant, muffled, but real. He's waking up. I had returned. I didn't remember clearly what had happened, only a feeling that I had once known something enormous and left it behind on the way back. But something in me wasn't the same. I no longer raged, no longer demanded fairness from life, no longer asked, why me? I just lived, softer, quieter, and with a strange knowing that something was watching. Not to save me, but to see what I would do with what remained of my time. I woke up in a hospital, dim ceiling lights, the beeping of machines, footsteps echoing softly on tiled floors, someone whispering beside my bed, the voice I recognized, though I couldn't name it. They said I had been in a coma for 3 days. A car accident. No one really believed I'd make it. I listened to their version of what happened. I nodded, but deep down, I knew something in me had changed. Not because I remembered something strange. The truth is, I didn't remember clearly at all. No vivid visions, no detailed dreams, just a strange blankness. And within that blankness, a lingering trace, like a fingerprint on glass. I couldn't see it, couldn't describe it, but it was there, whispering without words. I tried to tell a close friend, told him I'd been somewhere, that I'd met something unlike anything we've ever named, that I'd seen God, but not the God we talk about. He laughed gently and clapped my shoulder, probably just that. I dreamed of aliens during my appendix surgery, and I fell silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew I couldn't say it any better. I returned to ordinary life. I ate, went to work, made small talk, but inside, I wasn't who I was before. I no longer got angry at trivial things, no longer argued about right and wrong, felt the need to prove anything to anyone. I lived as if every day was borrowed. Sometimes I'd watch people debating morals, politics, faith, and I would smile, not out of pride, but because I knew it was all perspective, a language invented by those who needed structure. But I had seen, we are all observers, not here to win, but to see how we respond to the experience of being. At times, I look up at the sky, and I feel as if something is still watching. Not to judge, not to save, just to see. And I know it doesn't expect me to be perfect, only to choose something I can live with. And now, I sit, not to convince you. I know you don't have to believe. Maybe you'll even smile, like my old friend did. But I'm not telling this so you'll believe. I'm telling it so you might think again about the pain you felt, the moments you almost gave up, the things you call right and wrong. Whether you've truly lived or just reacted to what life threw at you. If you've ever asked, what happens after we die? I can't give you a clear answer, only a feeling that I've seen something enormous and left it behind on the way back. And that feeling was enough to change me forever, even if no one around me understands why. You can go on living as you always have, and maybe that's okay. But if one day you wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that something in you has shifted, and you can't quite explain why, then maybe, just maybe, you were there too, and you brought back a trace like I did. You've just forgotten, because humans must forget in order to go on living. But the trace, it stays, always.